Alrighty, welcome everyone today to another exciting, enlivening discussion. And today we're going to be talking about getting back to nature and how that pertains to our dogs and cats specifically. So I'm really delighted to be joined by Lauren Whiteman today, who has been such a profound and powerful voice in this space of guiding people back to what is natural, what is our natural species-specific diet when it comes to us and how we feed ourselves, and what is natural for our pets, our friends, our furry friends, our loved ones. So it's getting back to the simplicity of this, getting away from the complicated nuances that mainstream society likes to put forward to us. So today we're going to be discussing how can we best transition our loved ones away from the standardized veterinary approach, the kibble approach, and all these different methods which lead to a unfortunate and untimely demise of our loved ones, and how can we augment and have them thrive in the natural way for as long as they are capable of. So I'm really excited to be joined by Lauren today. Thank you for being here. And yeah, let's just jump right into the discussion.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Justin. Appreciate it. I'm excited to talk dogs and cats.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's just do with a little introduction and kind of just hear a bit more about you and how you got into this journey and how you've come to find yourself in where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So it kind of started with my own health. I was very sick for a long time. I had just a huge long list of health conditions and health complaints, insomnia, IBS, chronic pain, chronic fatigue. I was overweight, following all the mainstream health advice, and just, no matter what I did, I was eating whole grains and cooking food at home, didn't eat a lot of junk food, didn't eat McDonald's or anything like that. But still, everything that I did was just, my symptoms just kept getting worse and worse. And so eventually I just realized that we're just not meant to suffer, right? We're not meant to be on this pathway of just going straight downhill like everybody is. Everybody's, gets older and is just in pain, and we just accept it, and we just get wrinkles and we accept it, and we, just feel terrible all the time and we accept it. We're tired all the time, we accept it. And it's just, to me, I just couldn't accept that. So I just kept digging in and going deeper down the rabbit hole to try to find information wherever I could about how to heal the issues that I was having. And as a result of that, I ended up finding raw food, and I eventually found Dr. Herbert Shelton and T.C. Fry and all of the natural hygienists who were teaching, back in the 50s and the 1980s and stuff, the science of health, basically. And it's centered around returning to the natural human diet, a raw food-centered diet, a fruit-centered diet. And so I was like, well, this just makes sense. All of this just makes sense all the way down the line. So let's go for it. And immediately I started to see improvements in my health. Migraines that I was having on, every couple weeks were gone. Just my sleeping was better. The suicidal thoughts that I had been dealing with since I was in high school were gone. And so, I just kept going and just kept running with it. And eventually I got to the point where I had so much energy myself that I needed something to do with it, all of my extra energy. So I started rescuing animals, and I started taking in senior dogs from the Las Vegas shelter. And I started to see that all of these dogs were chronically ill. Like, they had cancer, they had seizures, they had dementia, they had heart murmurs and heart disease and diabetes. And it was like not one of these dogs was healthy in old age. And so I was like, this is a huge problem. Like, the same thing that we're seeing in us, we're seeing with our pets. And so, I just set out to do the same thing that I did for myself. What is their natural diet? How can we get as close to their natural diet as possible? How can I put the principles of natural hygiene and how the body heals, how can we put that into place for the dogs and then eventually for the cats? And I started to see results. I just started to see, Mr. Bean, he had seizures and dementia, and he was blind and deaf, and then he wasn't. He wasn't any of those things. He healed from all of them. Happy had a grapefruit-sized tumor, and that healed. And the vet said she's terminal. Bring her back when you're ready to euthanize. I give her a couple of weeks to live, if that. She lived another 3 years. She, lost all the weight she was carrying. She healed all the tumors that she had. She ran and played. We used to go hiking up mountains together. And this was from a dog that could barely walk. I actually had, when I first picked her up at the shelter, I had to set up a special harness for her just so she could walk, because she would fall over after 3 or 4 steps because she had vestibular disease so bad. And she was holding her head at a 180-degree angle the entire time. This poor dog had been dumped off at the shelter because the owners didn't have the funds to take care of vet bills and all of the disease conditions she had, because that's what the medical industry does, is they just throw more and more, have you throw more and more money at something that they're not fixing. And so these poor dogs are just getting dumped off at the shelter when their owners don't know what to do and can't afford the vet bills anymore. And so we just return to nature, put them back on their natural diet, and everything heals. And so we just started a Facebook group teaching people how to do that. And I'm working on a book to try to help people understand the processes better, understand the healing processes better, and just trying to get the information out there and talk to as many people as we can, and just answer as many questions as we can, and just try to right the ship, and just try to get our dogs and cats back to a place of health.
That's beautiful. It's such a encouraging story to see, like, the truth is so simple, and we like to live in this complicated, nuanced way of you've got to do this or that, and you've got to have all these different, and then sometimes we just throw up our hands because it's like it seems so overwhelming and we don't know what to do. So it is so encouraging to see a group like yours. I had the privilege of finding the Facebook group not too long ago, and it's truly unbelievable, the angelic help that Lauren does every single day, just helping people come to this simple answer of, like, no, we don't need to go to all these crazy protocols. We don't need to go to all these pills or chemicals or any of these kind of stuff. It's just coming back to simplicity. Are you feeding them what their species is designed to? Whereas dogs are omnivores, cats are carnivores. Are you feeding them in that way? And when they're sick, when they're unhealthy, are you looking to this simple method that we employ in our own body in looking at fasting, which what nature does in a perfect setting? That's what any animal does. So all other wild animals, they don't have these cancers and diseases and all these other complicated things. The only animals on Earth that have these problems are the ones in our homes, because we feed them these conventional ways, because we pump them full of chemicals and all sorts of pharmaceuticals whenever they have issues. So we've got to really reclaim and relook at these issues. And it is profound to see the simplicity of it. So yeah, I appreciate that introduction. And I'd love to just go into specifics on, because I know people have questions. People often ask me, hey, Justin, what do you feed your dog? And I have in recent years been very, very much stringent on this, getting back to the natural setting on feeding and fasting her. But I'd love to have a profound breakdown from you. So let's just jump into, what is the ideal way for a dog to thrive in this modern day?
Yeah, absolutely. So our primary kind of objective is to get as close to the natural model as possible. So we determine the natural model by looking at the wild canid species, so coyotes and wolves and wild dogs, and we look at what they're eating over time and what kind of percentages of plant foods they're eating versus meat foods and things like that. So what we found is that about 60% of the time they'll eat fruit and plant matter, and then about 40% of the time on average they'll be eating proteins. And this will vary by the season. So in the winter, when there's not as much plant matter, the amount of meat that they're eating is going up a little bit. And then in the summers, we find that like the wolves in Yosemite National Park, they're eating 83% of their diet for the month is blueberries. Right, so they're eating tons of fruit in the summer when the fruit is abundant, and that drops down the amount of prey that they're eating during the summer months. And then in the winter months, it expands a little bit. But so when you look at it overall across the entire year, you see that they're about 60% fruit and 40% meat meals. So that's where we try to set things up at. About 60% of their meals will be fruit days, and then 40% will be meat days. And so my typical rotation is going to be 3 or 4 fruit days in a row, and then 2 meat days back to back, and then a fasting day. But we will alter this based on the dog's conditions. So if I take in a senior dog that's really sick, and they say they've got cancer, they've got some seizures, chronic disease, then I'm going to lean towards more fruit. And temporarily, right? We're gonna start them off on more fruit just to get their body kind of cleaned out and ramp up their body's ability to heal. And then as we move to as they move towards health, we'll add in a little bit more meat meals. But so generally, I start out with that kind of 3 or 4 fruit days and then 2 meat days, but it can be flexible. So, sometimes you forget to defrost some meat, and so you'll just give them an extra fruit day, or, maybe the meat was on sale that week, and so you're going to give them an extra meat day to cut down costs. So we have a lot of flexibility. I should think about in nature, they're not going to have a very specific amount of time that they're able to catch prey. Like, we have refrigerators, so we can provide a prey meal anytime, but in nature, they're going to have to hunt and get that prey. And so that there's going to be a lot of missed hunts. There's going to be a lot of times where they don't get that prey. And so, we can be very flexible with that.
Yeah, beautiful. It's wonderful. So I want to just do a quick screen share real quick to show, and I'll reference these after the show is over, but just to show this guide that Lauren has put together for really making it simple. So this is what I've found, and I love the simplicity of it, of just going over what do dogs eat and how can we model this raw lifestyle for them. So in this guide, it simply just goes over what are the best forms of food for them, giving some examples of dogs that have healed themselves through this method. So what kind of fruits are ideal, what meats to look for, and then going and giving different examples. I'm just going to quickly go through this, giving different examples of some scheduling based on how the dog is and if they're healing or if they're younger. So as she mentioned before, here's more the wild model of having 2 meat days and 2 fasting days, but also giving other examples to kind of provide that flexibility, as she said, to model nature, because it's not going to be always consistent, and it's not always going to be consistent in our own lives too, just based on what is available to purchase and where we can get the good deals. And ideally, we're going to be going towards more wild game as opposed to the factory farmed stuff anyway, for a myriad of reasons. But yeah, this guide is absolutely phenomenal to getting just a really good understanding on how best to do this, and having a simple, handy guide to go along the way. So just want to thank you for providing that and for giving such a service and helping people in this way. So was there anything specifically you wanted to go over on this guide, or any additional notes on it?
Yeah, so just generally, the one thing that's not in the guide that we do have in the Facebook group is just like feeding percentages. And another thing that people kind of tend to maybe miss when feeding is that dogs do require the bone in their meat meals. And so, like, one of the reasons that humans can't survive on, we could survive, but we don't thrive on animal products is because we don't eat the bone. So every species that is naturally meant to eat meat, they're going to eat the bone, obviously raw, but in kind of the mainstream, there's this huge fear of bones because people will feed their dogs like a cooked chicken bone or the dog will get a cooked chicken bone out of the garbage, and then they'll think that the cooked bone is truly dangerous. And so that creates this entire mentality of like bones in general are dangerous for dogs. And so that's something that we see a lot of when people are new to this idea of feeding raw. They get kind of scared about feeding bones, but bone is essential for our dogs. And so we just, we want to make sure that people understand that as well. But other than that, it's, the feeding model is very flexible. You can work. That's why I have like a lot of different options in there, but you can also kind of make it your own. I guess like you'll see like I have the young pups where you have a little bit more meat. The senior dogs, we have them on a little bit more fruit. But you can shift between them based on your schedule, based on your, like for a lot of the people in our group are vegan. So they're trying to feed less meat as much as possible. And so a lot of them will do more fruits. And so it's completely flexible in that way where we can kind of shift more, especially with the dogs. With the cats, obviously, cats are true carnivores. And so that's not as, you can't feed them plant foods. They have to eat meat. But with the dogs, it's nice because you can be more flexible. You can have less impact on having to buy commercial meats and things like that by just focusing more on the fruits.
Yeah, it is great to have that flexibility, and because they are omnivores by nature, this does give them more diversity in what they can handle. And the fruity model is what I follow most of the time. So having 5 fruit days, 1 meat day, and 1 fasting day is what I do with Collie most of the time, unless I have an abundance of meat, and then sometimes I'll add an extra bit in there. But yeah, that's what I follow, and she is happy, healthy, full of energy, thriving, and just loving life. And she loves her fruit, and she loves her meat. So it's great to see that. But I'd love to maybe discuss a little bit about, because I know a lot of people are still working with conventional foods and conventional kibble and things of that nature. So how do you approach at a sort of a transitionary stage within dogs and getting them more aligned with this raw model?
Yeah. So most people think about when you're switching foods that you have to mix a little bit of this food with that food and mix a little bit of this food with that food, and slowly go from like the old food half, 3/4 and then half and then a quarter, and wean it down like that. We don't do that on the natural diet because the only reason that you have to do that with kibble is because the body sees kibble as a poison. And so when the body sees a poison coming in, it creates diarrhea. And that diarrhea is used by the body to flush out the poison. And then what happens is if we keep feeding the poison, eventually the body runs out of energy and says, I can't keep dehydrating myself, so I'm going to stop the diarrhea. And instead it starts to put scar tissue in place or mucus in place to protect the body from that toxic substance. So when a dog is on kibble for a while, the body will stop creating the diarrhea. It's still a toxic substance, but the body just shifts the way that it's dealing with it. But then when we switch kibbles, the body then is like, oh, new poison coming in. I'm going to try to eliminate this one using diarrhea. So we end up with a lot of diarrhea when you're switching from one kibble to the next. And eventually, if the person just sticks with that kibble, then the diarrhea will die off because the body just wants to conserve its water. But with the natural diet, you're not dealing with any of that because you're not putting the poison in. So the one thing we do want to do is we want to make sure that the pathway through the bowels is clear before we put our first fruit meal in, because fruits can ferment if they're sitting in the stomach too long, not able to move through. So we always do 24 hours of fasting. So it's just pick up the kibble, throw it in the garbage, 24 hours, no food, and then you start offering the fruit. And some dogs will take to the fruit right away. Other dogs, it might take a little bit of kind of coaxing or just letting them get used to the smells and the different textures and stuff like that. So what we do is we just offer the fruit twice a day. We put it down for 15 minutes, and then we pick it up. If they don't finish it, we stick it in the fridge, and then we take it back out for them later. And so I've had 137 fosters and counting. All of them have gotten onto fruit. It is their natural food, so there's never been a dog that is not taken to it. Sometimes in our group, you'll find people that are overfeeding on the meat, and so their dogs just don't take to the fruit. But in our experience with 137 dogs, we've never had a problem with it. It's you have to make sure that you're just not giving them too much other stuff so that they actually get to eat the fruit, because fruit doesn't contain anything addictive. So like a dog will eat kibble even if it's not hungry, and a dog will get itself, absolutely obese, or will eat until they throw up, because there's so many addictive chemicals in the kibble, and even in the raw foods, there's so many additives and there's so much excess fat in there that it just tricks the dog's senses. So they'll eat even when they're not hungry, they'll eat even when they're sick, and that can cause a lot of problems. But with fruit, there's nothing addictive to it. So they only eat when they're actually hungry. So sometimes when we have a dog that's coming in from the shelter and they just come off kibble, they might not take to the fruit right away, and we might actually end up fasting them for quite a while. So most of my dogs will take to the fruit within 72 hours. That's like 95% of the dogs have started eating their fruit within 72 hours or less. I have had a couple that have lasted longer. Dixie was one of them. She held out for 7 days before she tried any of the fruit. And we just gave her the fruit every day, twice a day, and she would sniff at it. And a couple times she picked it up and put it out on the floor and just wouldn't touch it. And then eventually she just started eating it. And Sheba is my longest. Sheba held out for 8 days before she would even taste the food. And then it was 13 days before she actually ate any fruit. But then now she absolutely loves it. I mean, she yells at me if I'm trying to eat a banana in front of her and I'm not sharing with her. I can't walk in the house with bananas without her doing spins and jumps and those are for me, right? So yeah, it's really fun to see how much they enjoy the fruit once you get them onto it, but it can be a little bit of a process just getting them used to it, just because it's a new smell, new texture, new flavor. So same thing, that we do is oh, I don't know about that. I don't know if I want to try that. Oh, that smells a little weird. And then, after you start eating it for a while, then you're like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. How could I have not liked cantaloupe before, So yeah, it's fun. Yeah.
That's great. So just to summarize, it's when we're transitioning, we fast for 24 hours and then we begin to offer the fruit twice a day, 15 minutes out, and then put it back in the fridge if they're not eating it, and just keep offering in that same way and allow them to fast as long as they want to, basically, before they're willing to embark on this transition into this new form of food. So that can vary from anywhere from a few days to a week or longer even. But so is that pretty much cover it? Yeah.
And just, you don't necessarily have to pick it up after 15 minutes. That's just my personal preference, because we have a lot of dogs in the house. So if you just have one dog in the house and you want to leave the fruit out, that's fine. I mean, most fruit's not going to go bad, in a couple hours sitting out. But just because we have a lot of other dogs in the house, we will pick it up so that the other dogs don't just come by and eat their food. And also just, it's a good habit to just, let the dogs know, okay, it's eating time now and we're going to eat now. And when you do that, it just kind of gets them in the habit of actually finishing their meal then, instead of kind of coming back and forth. But that's totally just up to your preference. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, that's great. And it really does model how it's easiest for us to transition foods through, if we're coming from a conventional cooked processed foods kind of way. Using something like fasting or going on a fruit only cleanse is very helpful to recalibrate the body. So it makes sense to employ that same method with any living creature to get them off of the kibble crack, which I can speak from personal experience. I've never fed my dog kibble in that way, but at times when I have gone to stay with my parents and they're feeding their dogs kibble, and I do my best to keep it away from them, but she'll sneak off and go find the kibble wherever it is, because it is very addictive. And the last time I was there, she went for a few days of eating this, unbeknownst to me, and she had quite a large cyst develop on her back, which is just a clear indication that this is poison. She's eating this poison, and Of course she was fine. It went away after a day or two of fasting and then getting back onto the fruit. But it did take a second for her to recalibrate and get away from this addictive substance. It's designed in this way to be like a drug, just like all processed foods are designed to be like drugs for us. They're giving us this quick hit of dopamine. They're not actually providing the nutrients and the sustenance for us, but they're just tricking our brain and the parasites within us to go and hunger for this thing that's really not doing us any good except for giving us sensations, but it's not nourishing our body in any way. So it's the same principles apply for dogs and cats as well.
Yeah, and really with the kibble, they're tricking their senses. So what they're doing is they're using our dogs and cats' natural instincts against them. So in nature, fat is very rare commodity. So, obviously the rabbits and the birds and stuff, they're all out there eating their natural diet. So they're not packing on the pounds. They're not loaded down with fat. So most wild prey is very lean, maybe 2%, 5% body fat. And, but so fat is, very calorie dense. So instinctually, it's a high value food for basically all species, even ourselves. Like, we can really overdo it on the nuts and seeds with the, plant fats, or like when we're having like a stressful day, we'll go through the potato chips because of the oils, that high density, high calorie density. So these food industries have kind of figured this out and realized that they could basically put any kind of garbage into a dough ball, put it into a little kibble ball, and then they can spray coat it in oil, and the dog will smell the oil, and the dog will be like, oh, this is high value food. And so it's not that the dog actually likes the kibble, it's that we're working against their natural instincts, and we're just tricking their natural instinct to eat fat whenever they come upon it. So that's one of the things that we do with the raw food, is that we actually, so we didn't talk about this yet, but we trim the fat off of when we get the chicken or the, Cornish hens or something like that, we're taking the skin off and we're trimming the fat, because we're trying to get as close to that natural prey as possible. So in nature, again, it's very lean prey. So we don't want our dogs to be over consuming that fat, because their physiology was never designed for that. So what you see on the kibble is, dogs getting things like pancreatitis, which is 100% caused by fat. And so, it's just that spray coating of oil over the food ends up just overwhelming the body with fat, and then it ends up causing all sorts of health issues, and not just pancreatitis, but all sorts of other issues.
Yeah, which would lead to the diabetes as well, because when you have that overabundance of fat in the system, it clogs the cells and prevents the sugars, which is what the body's really searching for, from digesting, which leads to that imbalance of insulin and causes all sorts of other issues, which can lead to what we call diabetes. So it makes sense why you see so many dogs with health ailments that are eating the conventional kibble, including that. But it's just it's all part of the same imbalance of looking at things from a sensational view of getting things addicted to it. So you're buying this particular brand instead of what is actually going to support and help and heal in that kind of way. So
and they try to trick us too. It's like they'll add the food dyes to make it look like there's little peas and carrots to make us think, oh, my dog's getting, vegetables. And then, the bag will have all this like fresh looking meat and fresh looking, peas and vegetables and fruits and blueberries and all sorts of stuff on it. And so, all the marketing, they're telling us it's balanced, it's healthy, it's scientifically formulated. Yeah, and the list just goes on of all the little marketing terms that they use to trick us into thinking this is a, nutritious food. It's going to provide for our dogs, when in fact it's really just the garbage disposal of the food industry. They're just taking all of the waste products from the human food, and they're just grinding it all up into this product, and then they're just spraying it with oil and coating it to trick the dog's senses, so that the dog thinks that it's getting something nutritious. We think they're getting something nutritious, and meanwhile they're just getting literally just garbage.
Yeah, and if we took a more honest look at that, I mean, you're never going to see an animal out in nature gathering a whole bunch of, like a wild dog, for example, gathering a whole bunch of berries and peas and carrots, and then also gathering up some chicken that it had caught and making a big salad all together with just that. Like, they're never going to eat in that way. And just the same, we're not designed to eat in that way as well, to eat these complicated mixtures of things and varying digestive times and processes. So to get back to the simplicity of just eating one thing at a time, and making sure that that is digested before moving into something else. And so that's why with this way of eating, you have your fruit days, and then you have your meat days, but you have a fasting between to kind of give more ample time for that slower digestive meat process to really eliminate out of the body before you start bringing in something else. So yeah, it's great to follow within our own lives as well, of just recognizing, okay, what order am I eating these things? Am I giving ample time for me to digest this fruit or whatever before I move into another category of food? And the more simply we do this, the more ease we put on our body, the more alkaline we become. And that just helps everything else to flow as it needs to. And the same thing applies for our pets as well. Yeah, it is so simple in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, it's a great point you made about them not mixing foods. It's one of the reasons why we do plant days and meat days. We do our fruit days completely separate from our meat days, because that's how they would eat in nature. They would, basically wander around and try to hunt. And then if they weren't successful, then they would go to the fruit trees and they would get their, fill. And also eating very simply. We have a tendency as humans to kind of make these very elaborate meals where we're mixing 5 or 6 different ingredients or more into one pot and making some sort of like soup or something like that, where it's a lot of ingredients all at once. It's just very hard for our stomach to digest. But if you think about it in nature, the dog or the coyote or the wolf, they're going to find the apple tree and they're just going to sit there at the apple tree and eat until their stomach is full. They're not going to take one apple and then go over to the mango tree and grab one, and then go over and grab some bananas and then go pick some carrots out of the ground. Like, they're just not ever going to do that. They're going to eat at one place until they're full. And then the next day they're going to eat in another place until they're full. So they'll go to the berry patch and they'll just walk through the berry patch and just keep eating berries until they're full. And so that's, what we try to mimic with the natural diet is that as well. Whereas with the kibble, they're trying to cram everything into this one, little kibble ball, and then tell you that it's scientifically formulated and balanced and all of that, but it's impossible for the body to digest, because the body requires different digestive enzymes for proteins than for carbohydrates, and those actually cancel each other out. So if you put a protein and a carbohydrate in the stomach at the same time, neither digests well. Both of them end up having their enzymes canceled out, and then those foods are cooked to incredibly high temperatures, so they're already even more difficult for the body to digest. And so we end up with this kind of just very poorly digesting slop with the kibble. And that's also the reason why kibble stool is smelly, whereas when we feed them naturally on the raw foods, we don't have to deal with those, smelly odors from our stool. It's like everything is nice and clean, it's well digested, there's no fermentation. And that's what in the kibble food, that's what's actually causing the smell, is the bacteria fermenting the indigestible material that's in this kibble. So, that's another nice added bonus of feeding the raw diet, is that you don't have to deal with smelly poop.
It is. It's a great benefit. And just to give some more examples around that. So with my dog, on the days that she eats watermelon or papaya, then her poop comes out, it's red or orange, and it's quite odorless, and it's very easy to clean up. And even if it sits there for a few days, it does dissipate fairly quickly. It's not something that lingers around that long. So if you have a lot of land or space where they can work with, then it works in this sort of natural reciprocating way, as nature was intended, to break down that feces and have it go back into the land. And the same thing with the meat days, it comes out in this sort of chalky white kind of way, which is the bones being broken down along with the protein composites. And that breaks down very quickly too. It becomes like a powderized substance. There's no smell or anything to it, and it breaks down naturally back into the land as well. So it is a great benefit in that way, and it just makes total sense. The truth is very simple in that way.
Yeah, one of my favorite things. So I have a dog yard. We have a doggy door, and the cats and dogs can go out into that. It's like a smaller fenced area. And so every year come springtime, we have all sorts of volunteer plants because, they eat the seeds from the watermelon, the seeds from the cantaloupe, the seeds from the tomatoes, and then they come out in their stool. And so we have like tomato plants over here, cucumber plants over there, and melon plants over here. And it's just like every year, it's just like a fun game to see what's going to come up, what's going to grow. And then just it grows so well too, because it's basically being planted in this perfect little fertile medium of, their stool, like leftover fiber from the fruit and everything. So you end up with a whole bunch of very healthy looking plants. And then it's wonderful too, because the dogs can then eat from those plants. So right now I have cucumbers and I have tomatoes and I have a bunch of watermelons growing up the fence. And so as they ripen, the dogs will actually pick them themselves and have like, a steady supply of food just constantly regenerating, which I think is just super fun.
Yeah, it just goes back to, we actually did a show last year on this idea around pets and how it's become this sort of unnatural way that we're caring so much for them that we're actually taking away from their natural ability to care for themselves. And I'm not, for any instance, advocating for people to do a quick jump of just saying, I'm going to release my pet into the wild and hope that it cares for itself. We can't make that step right now, but to recognize that in an ideal state, in an ideal reality where we have ample land and animals are free to roam as they see fit, then we can move back to this natural setting, because the earth is designed to give them freely in abundance in all ways. All we have to do as stewards of this earth is just to help tweak little things here and there, but ultimately it takes care of itself. So to recognize this process in action and seeing that in a space like that, I'm sure is very encouraging to know that, if you're not around or you're not able to care for as many, the earth is going to do it for you, which is how it was designed to be.
Yeah. What's really cool too is that I know, like growing up myself, like I grew up in kind of suburbs, leaning towards more city life. And so we were very disconnected from our food and very disconnected from how much is actually out there in the wild. And so one of the things that I've learned actually through this process, and I moved from living in New Jersey, where it's mostly kind of urban environment, to I now live in East Texas, and we live very rural right now. And what took me like 40 years to learn is that the land just provides so much for us. There's so many fruit trees, like just walking around our property. We're just like, oh, there's a pear tree, there's a pecan tree, there's a hackberry tree. There's some wild blackberries, here's some blueberries. And it's just all in the woods, and it's just always been there. But because my mind was on processed food and junk food, and I didn't really have that connection to nature, I didn't see it there. It was, it was there all along, but I didn't see it there. And then also because, I grew up in more of like a concrete jungle where there's very little green. We get so disconnected from what is actually out there and ample. And then, of course, the whole like New World Order kind of programming is everything's overpopulation and there's not enough resources. And then you get out to these like rural areas of the country and you see like there's just resources for miles, and we just don't know about them because we've just gotten so disconnected from what's real. But one of my favorite things is walking the dogs. They'll eat the wild greens from the ground, and they just walk around. They haven't lost their instinct for it like we have, so they just walk around sniffing stuff, and no, not gonna eat that one. Oh, this one's tasty. And so I actually will start eating whatever they're eating, like, oh, how does that taste? Just to see, like, oh, okay. And then I'll learn about new herbs or new, like, lettuce greens and things like that are edible. And it's all, it's just all by following them and them following their instincts that they haven't lost, that we've lost. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is really cool to have them be our guide in that sense, and just reclaiming that sense within us. Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit more about, because I know this question comes up a lot in your group, but like, what do I do if my dog is ailing from X, Y, or Z? You know, what do I do if I'm, especially as we're moving from transitioning from the toxic overload, and if any of us have begun that journey within ourselves, you recognize that there is a detox journey that has to occur as we sort of recalibrate ourselves and move through these different things. We can't experience these kind of symptoms. So how can we manage or help the dogs in healing a bit faster in these ways when these kind of things show up?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so important to understand is that a lot of times we think that we're just going to move from eating bad to eating healthy and everything's just going to go kind of in an uphill trajectory, when in reality, healing is much more of like a roller coaster, where it's like you feel good for a bit and then you're going to feel really bad. And then, you're going to feel a little bit better and then you're going to feel bad again, because your body's going to start purging everything. So, it's like you had 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years of bad actions against your body, and now you have to feel the consequences in order to actually get your body back to a state of health. So same thing with our dogs is that, we put them on kibble for 5 years or 10 years. They have 5 or 10 years worth of consequences built up in their body that have to be dealt with. And so when we switch over to the natural foods, they're going to have a period where they're going to be feeling so much better from all the chronic disease they were dealing with. But then they're going to have a period of detox, a period of cleaning out, purging the body. And sometimes that can get scary. And so sometimes, people get scared and then they, run back to medicine, or they run back to, thinking that, unfortunately, medicine tends to program people's minds in this idea of deficiency, which deficiency it's almost impossible to create deficiency. You have to literally starve a person or an animal to create deficiency. But we have in our mind, because we have this huge vitamin and supplement market that is just constantly running commercials and ads in front of us. So we have this kind of idea stuck in our brains. And so a lot of people see the healing processes start to begin, and they think, oh, I've got to stop this. I have to stop this. They must be deficient in something. They must be missing something. I've got to add in, the oils, the MCT oils, or the, omega-3 oils, or I've got to add in flax seeds, or I've got to add in, XYZ supplement or mushrooms, or, and then people get in the weeds just trying to supplement their way out of something that they shouldn't be stopping in the first place. So that's one of the things that our group really tries to focus on teaching is it's important to know how to feed properly, but what's much more important is to understand how to allow the body to heal. Because if you don't understand that, then when the body starts to heal, you're going to do a lot of damage. So that's what we try to teach. That's what a lot of our kind of content is focused on, because it does get scary. But, the one thing that we always keep in mind is, like, when humans need to clean their body, they have a cold or they have a flu, you have some sort of expulsion symptoms, you have fatigue, you have diarrhea, you have vomiting, all of these things are pushing stuff out. And so our dogs have the same exact type symptoms. They might shift a little bit. Like, dogs tend to have lots of ear infections. That's the body pushing waste out through the ears. They tend to get lots of eye discharge. That's the body pushing waste out through the eyes. They might, a little bit more rare, but they might get swollen gums and start drooling. They might get red and itchy paws, or they might get hot spots on their skin, or they might lose their fur as the body just pushes all the waste out through the skin. So those are kind of the most common symptoms that we see. And then fatigue, of course, anytime we're detoxing ourselves, fatigue is going to be that first sign that we see. Hopefully we obey it and go and rest. Our dogs are much better about actually obeying that and going and resting. So one of the things that we usually see is, like, the dog will all of a sudden have very little appetite and will go and just be sleeping all day. And then people get really, scared. Oh, my dog doesn't have appetite. I need to force it to eat. Or, no, my dog doesn't have energy, so I need to force it to have energy. And that's actually the opposite of what we want to do. We want to let the body be fatigued, because when we're in fatigue, it's not that we don't have the energy, it's that the energy has shifted. So we still have the same amount of energy, but instead of the energy being available to run our arms and legs and be able to kind of move us around or just have that kind of external energy, the body has shifted all that energy internally into our organs to clean and to repair and to rebuild. And so when we see that shift to fatigue, it's very natural based on our medical programming to be afraid of that, when in reality, we have to learn to embrace that, because that is the healing process. So that's the biggest kind of thing that we have to always focus on, is the body always creates symptoms intelligently for the benefit of the body. So the symptoms themselves are the cure for the disease conditions. Whereas in medicine, they say the symptoms are bad, we have to apply poisons to the body to stop those symptoms. We say, no, the symptoms are created by the body to expel waste, to correct conditions, to correct the chemistry of the body. And so therefore they are beneficial, and we don't want to stop them. So that's kind of the biggest key, that if anybody takes anything away from how to heal, that's what you really need to know, is that, the symptoms are the cure.
Yeah, and beautifully said. And it does sort of provide a simple answer. I mean, I'm again amazed at the amount of effort and time that Lauren spends helping people to relieve these sort of fears or worries that they might have in whatever they're experiencing. But the answer is pretty much always the same. Just get out of the body's way, let it do what it needs to do, and go fast for however long it needs to sort of augment that. Of course, manage it appropriately depending on where the dog or cat is coming from, where we're coming from, the same sort of thing. We have to manage it responsibly, but to truly just allow that healing process to go through as it needs to. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about the fasting process and kind of what you advocate within that when you do see particular dogs. Of course, I know it's specific and whatever you're dealing with, but overall, the general blueprint is the same of how to approach that. So I'd love to speak a little bit more about fasting.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we do on our diet that most of the raw food programs kind of neglect is that we do incorporate a daily, like a fasting day, at least every 3 to 10 days within the feeding program. And there's two reasons for that. The first is digestion speeds. So meat takes a very long time to digest, and fruit digests very quickly. And if you put a quick digesting food in the body immediately following a slow digesting food, then you end up with gas and bloating and burping and discomfort and all of that. So we're trying to avoid that. And, you can end up with diarrhea too if, the body says, oh, this is fermenting too much, it's creating alcohol. Alcohol is a poison, so let's rush this poison out, and then we end up with diarrhea. So one of the things that we do is we'll have our fruit days, fruit digest quickly. Then we'll have our meat days, meat digest slowly. And then we'll have a fasting day. And that allows the body to complete the digestion of the meat, because the meat's moving very slowly. And this way that the meat is completely out of the system before our next fruit day hits. But it also just gives the body a chance to rest, a chance to clean out any kind of burden that may have built up during the week. So we were eating all these days, and then we had this kind of burden that built up, and now the body can just kind of spring clean a little bit each week. So that's one of the things we incorporate, is just kind of that regular fasting day, just to give the body a chance to keep up with any of the day-to-day junk that can build up. And then we utilize fasting, extended fasts, to actually facilitate healing or to increase healing or speed up the healing process. So for example, if one of our dogs starts to have detox symptoms, like for example, Gus, he started having some ear issues. So his body was starting to clean, and it was choosing the ear as that avenue to eliminate waste. And so as soon as we saw that he was starting to get discomfort in his ears, like he was shaking his head, so okay, we're going to move straight into a fast. So we just went into the fast that day, and then we will fast until the symptom clears or until they don't have reserves. So for most dogs coming off of kibble, you're going to have plenty of reserves. You can fast them for 40 days without even blinking. They're going to have plenty of weight to hold on to. But if a dog is, maybe a senior or is thin, is maybe has been struggling with IBS its whole life, and so never really put on a lot of weight, then we might have to do shorter fasts to make sure that they're not utilizing up all of their reserves. But so we base each fast on the amount of reserves the dog has. But most of our fasts are going to be between 5 days and 10 days. Find that most symptoms are going to clean up and clear up by then. So that's typically what we end up doing. And then sometimes what we'll do is we'll fast, and then maybe the symptom doesn't completely clear. It's improved enough. We'll break, we'll refeed. We'll give them a couple of meat days to get their weight back up so that they have more reserves. And then we can go back into another fast as needed. But generally speaking, dogs can fast 30 to 40 days. Cats can fast up to 20 days. But obviously we're going to take it day by day based on what their available weight is when they start. And same thing with us humans. Like we humans, we can fast 40 days. We can. There are humans that have fasted 100 days and longer than that. So it's all about what you're starting with, what you're kind of starting with reserves wise, how long we base it on. But our goal with the fast is generally when the body is cleaning, as I mentioned before, fatigue is that first sign that we see. So generally, if we start to see fatigue, we want to move into a fast quickly because that'll allow the body to just very quickly move through whatever it's trying to move through. If we keep feeding into that fatigue, then it's more likely to create worse symptoms. So it's the same thing with us humans. Like if you get a cold, the first sign of the cold, before you have a runny nose, before you start sneezing or anything like that, is you just feel run down. And usually you'll know that you have a cold coming on because you can feel that. You kind of instinctively know, I feel run down. I just don't have the energy I usually have. And so if we catch it right then and there, and we go into a fast that day and we go to bed and we, go to bed early, we drink lots of water, we rest, most likely our cold will never even blossom into a full blown cold. It'll just, maybe we'll get a little sniffle and then it'll pass because we're giving the body the immediate opportunity to just work on whatever it was trying to work on. So we try to do the same thing with the dogs is, we just pay attention to how they're feeling. If we see them moving into fatigue or they start to develop symptoms, extra mucus, eye boogers, skin issues, dry skin, anything like that, then we'll just move into the fast and we'll extend the fast as long as needed to clear that symptom. So our primary goal with all fasts is to fast long enough for the symptom to clear. Sometimes we have to break the fast just because they don't have the weight available to continue. So maybe we did a 10-day fast, but now they're too skinny. They still have the symptoms, so we'll refeed for a while. And then if the symptoms still remain after like 2 or 3 weeks of refeeding, we'll do another shorter fast, and then we'll refeed again, and then another shorter fast and refeed again as needed. But for the most part, in the over 100 dogs that I've had, I've found that 90% of them clear whatever symptoms they are within that first fast, usually within, I would say on average, it's usually 7 to 10 days is sufficient to clear pretty much any symptoms.
Yeah, that's great. And I know that can be shocking for people who haven't heard of this length of time of fasting before. But again, that's why this support group and having access to people like Lauren is so beautiful, because you can see, and I know you've shared some studies around dogs who have fasted for an incredible length of time and still had high energy, still been able to jump up onto things and still running around and all sorts of stuff. So just recalibrating our idea around how long the body can sustain without food is profound, just to have that sort of comfort in knowing that this is truly the way that we're designed. We don't need extra supplements and things to heal. We have everything built within us, and the same thing applies to our pets.
Yeah, and I think it's hardest for us because if we're coming from eating a cooked food diets ourselves, then our stomach is constantly hurting. And so a lot of people, we've been taught that hunger pains or hunger pangs are hunger when they're not at all. So, hunger is never an uncomfortable feeling. But a lot of people, if they go a certain number of hours without a meal, they start to have the rumbling stomach, the painful stomach, they have headaches, they have dizziness, nausea. All of those are not hunger. Those are all detox symptoms. Those are all the body saying, I'm super toxic and I'm trying to clean. And so as soon as you stop putting food in me for a tiny bit of time, I'm going to jump on this and try to get this waste out. And what I find is that when people come in who have been eating kind of the standard American or standard Western diet of cooked foods, it's much harder for them to wrap their head around fasting. Whereas somebody who's been eating closer to the natural diet and doesn't have all of that discomfort, it's much easier for them to understand fasting, because for them, skipping a meal is not a big deal. But for the person who's eating cooked food chronically, skipping a meal becomes a headache and nausea and dizziness. And so they think their dog's going to experience the same. And in part, if a dog is on kibble and they skip a meal, they probably will have like bile vomiting. They might throw up, or they might just feel, yucky, because their body is trying to clean right away and get rid of that stuff. But as we transition them into the fruit and they're no longer injuring the stomach, they're no longer having that discomfort, that the tummy rumbles, the hunger pangs or anything like that. And so fasting for them is very easy. And, one of the things that I've learned over the years is, I'm such a baby about fasting, but like watching my dogs, it's no big deal to them at all. They just, I'm not eating today. Okay, I'm going to go back to bed, it's really helped me to fast longer myself, because I'm just like, they make it look so easy. What am I being such a big baby about it? But it's I think a great learning opportunity for us to learn from them and heal them at the same time, and then learn to heal ourselves also by watching them heal and watching them like set a good example of like, for us, I think there's so many temptations when we transition to raw foods. We're constantly tempted by our family and friends bringing in all sorts of junk food. But with dogs, it's kind of like they just eat whatever you put in front of them. So they don't emotionally eat. They just, today we're getting bananas. Okay, today's bananas. They don't complain about it. And so it's kind of fun to watch them and see how we can shift our way of thinking about food, because we do tend to I'm going to eat what I'm craving. So I'm going to eat cookies or I'm going to eat cake, because I'm craving this, rather than eating out of actual hunger. So.
Yeah, beautiful. It is. It is so very similar within us as well, of just having more difficulty getting into fasting depending on where you're coming from. And this is due to the body being loaded down with parasites, candida, and all sorts of aspects that are within us that cause alleviating and moving away from that much more difficult, because as we start to move away from that, this candida, these parasites, this fungus within us is actually tapped into our nervous system that's trying to get us to go back to the foods that it's thriving on. So we're not even making our own decisions. And so that same thing is playing out within dogs and cats as well. If they're coming from a conventional cooked kibble kind of standpoint, they're having to deal with all of these things alleviating within their nervous system as well, which can be quite uncomfortable. I mean, it's about as literal as you can get as signing a deal with the devil when we start to eat these kind of things, because we're inviting all of these other hosts within us that are controlling our nervous system in that kind of way. So it is important to consider in that, and just to be gentle in where we move through that, but know that it's the right way. It's the right way to move through this. So yeah, that was well said.
If I can just clarify though, so like candida is actually something that's created by the body to benefit the body, but not really to benefit the body. Candida eats our waste. And so that's why, when we're producing a lot of waste, our candida is happy, because it's got lots of food. And then what we're actually feeling when, like, the reason that we have these kind of cravings is these are drug addictions. So, if you go on heroin, you're going to have a high when you're putting in the heroin, and then you're going to feel absolutely awful when you stop. Well, when you're eating salt, you're going to have the high when you're getting the salt, and then you're going to feel awful when you try to get off of it. Or when you have the fried oil, you're going to have that high from the drugging effect, and then you're going to feel awful. And so, we can see this very easily with drug addicts, or, if you go out to the bar and you overdrink and then you have the hangover the next day, it's very clear to us that, oh, I drank the alcohol, I poisoned my body, and now my body is, beating me up over it. But for some reason, when we see the exact same things with food, it's very hard for us to wrap our head around that. And so we've been taught that when this happens with alcohol, it's a hangover. When the same exact effects happen with the potato chips that you ate yesterday, it's a germ coming and attacking your body and creating a cold or a flu or something like that. And your neighbor sneezing on you is what caused this. And so we don't have this connection with our food and how our food is a drug that drugs the body and makes it feel terrible. And so that's the biggest hurdle I think a lot of people have when moving to raw food, is understanding that when I put in something that's bad for my body, there's going to be a consequence. And that consequence is going to be that cold or flu symptom, that detox symptom. And so, same thing for our pets, is when we've been putting in this kibble that's very bad for them, and it's a drugging effect, there's going to be a bounce back effect where they feel terrible, and there's going to be all of this time for, everything to purge out. But then once we get all of that purged out, then we're, no longer feeding those cravings anymore. And so the cravings start to die away.
Yeah, well said. Thank you for that. And just a quick detail question on fasting. So on the fasting days and extended fasting periods, do you always put out water for them? Have that water available for them to use during that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So we always water fast, never dry fast. Sometimes the dog or cat will choose not to drink for 18 hours or something like that. That's perfectly fine. But we always want water to be available for them. And usually if they're fasting, I will actually move the water to them. So if they're hanging out in their bed over here, they're like, a lot of my dogs will use crates. I have all of their crates set up with like a blanket over the top and a nice bed inside. So it's like a den for them. And so it's a safe space that they can go to. And so when they're not feeling well, a lot of times they'll set themselves up in their crate. And so I'll bring the water right into the crate with them so that they don't have to go anywhere to drink. But sometimes they will go 18 or even 24 hours without drinking, and they'll just sleep straight through. Like, for example, I had Mr. Bean, when he was healing from seizures, he self-fasted for 5 days, and he literally slept for 23 and a half hours a day. He got up one time per day. He would drink some water. He would go outside to pee. He would walk right back to his bed and went right back to sleep. And he just did that for 5 days straight. And then, he woke up and he wanted his bananas, and he was, just back to normal. But so, yeah, it's always water. And then we try to not disturb their sleep as much as possible. So if they're laying down, if they're fasting and you can set them up in a room that you're not traveling through a lot, that's really great. Or if you have like a little crate that you can set them up in so that they have like a very quiet corner of the room that feels safe to them, that's always great as well.
That's awesome. And you mentioned briefly in that just the signs that you might notice of when it might be time to break the fast, if the symptoms have alleviated or if their energy levels are back to normal. Can you kind of explain that a bit more?
Yeah. So one of the things that we typically look for if we're doing a fast is for their normal energy levels to return. So like, as I just mentioned with Bean, he just kind of slept. And then bam, he woke up and he was just up and like looking for food. So usually if we see that shift in their energy, that's my indication. Like, hey, today's the day to feed. Sometimes especially like when we're first transitioning to the diet, the dog might not move into a kind of lowered energy. So like, for example, I had a dog that had, it was a younger dog, and she had a skin issue, and we fasted her, but every single day she was out there running and playing like she was, like nothing was going on. So sometimes you'll have that where you can't use the energy level to judge. But usually when they do start to move into the symptoms, you'll usually see that kind of fatigue. And then when we see them come out of that fatigue, that's when we're going to break the fast. If you see, like with the younger dogs, that they're not moving into that kind of lowered energy, then we just kind of watch the symptom itself. So say like, for her, she had this like red spot on her leg. So we just fasted a couple days. And then as soon as that was cleared, then we just went back to feeding fruit. And I always, with the dogs, when we come back off of a fast, we always do fruit for at least a week. And the only exceptions to that is if a dog has been going through a long detox process where their weight is dipping very low, then we'll do like 1 or 2 days of fruit and then try to do several meat days back to back to help them regain weight in between. But for the most part, what we want to do is we want to do like a week of fruit after, just to allow the digestive system to clean out, to allow any last like lingering bits of waste that the body's trying to eliminate, to allow that to eliminate more quickly before we go back to the meat meals. Just because the meat meals, because they're so slow to move, they clog up the digestive tract for a little while. And so if we feed too many meat meals right after a fast, sometimes we'll see the symptoms come back just because the pathways are not clear. So when we're breaking a fast, we always want to start with small meal also. So if you've just done a 1-day fast, not a big deal, or a 3-day fast, you could just go back to normal size meals. But anything beyond 3 days, 72 hours, the body shifts into ketosis and the digestive system shuts down. And so the longer we're past that 3-day point, the more slowly we want to restart digestion. So I might start, like say a dog has been on a 10-day fast. The first day, I'm going to feed them about a quarter of what their normal meal size would be. And then the next day, I'll do a half of their normal meal size, and then 3/4, and then full on the 4th day. So we're just letting everything ramp back up slowly. And then, maybe the 4th day, then we'll do 5th, 6th, 7th will be all fruit at full-size meals, and then day 8 would be their next meat meal.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And yeah, on that quick guide, there's a reference for how much is ideal for a dog to eat based on their size. So that's a good guide to go by. And it provides a range too, so you can kind of play into it and see where your dog responds and how it works with that. So that's quite helpful as well. I wanted to.
They have. I was going to say they have obviously, we do a range because you'll have dogs that are very sedentary and you have dogs that are very active. So, your very sedentary dog might only need 4 or 5% of their body weight in food, but a highly active dog might need 10%, or even some of the really small dogs like the Chihuahuas or the Yorkies. Sometimes they need even up like 12, 15% to maintain their body weight. So we always say kind of start on the low end of the spectrum and then work your way up if they start losing weight.
Great. Yeah. And just like with us, you having a reduced eating window in a day is ideal. I know that you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you typically advocate moving towards just once a day feeding for dogs. Is that correct? And can you explain a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So again, that's like digestion speeds. So it's particularly important on the meat days. And also if you think about just how they would react in nature. So if they caught a prey, they're going to gorge and they're going to eat the whole thing because they don't have a refrigerator to put the extras back in. They don't have protection in case another, animal that eats meat is coming along. So they want to get they want to get the value out of what they've just, worked very hard to get. So they're going to gorge on it, and dogs can eat up to 20 or 25% of their body weight. So they might eat 20% of their body weight and just have like a big fat belly, and then they'll go sleep. And so in nature, sometimes wolves will have, if they get a big prey and they all, they gorge themselves on it, they might fast for 5 or 7 days after that before they even start looking for fruit to eat or start looking for any meat to eat. So that's one thing to keep in mind when we're feeding them is just that gorge fast mentality that they are naturally designed for. But yeah, we just the feeding amount is going to vary based on how many fruit days you're feeding and how many meat days you're feeding. And so, we can be kind of flexible with that.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for that. And I see on here the difference between young puppies and older dogs. As far as young puppies, you tend to advocate for more meat days, and then older dogs, maybe less. So can you just sort of explain the thought process behind that and differences between puppies and as they get older?
Yeah, so as we get older, our digestion naturally just gets weaker, and so they tend to slow down with the meat meal digestion periods, and especially if they've been on kibble a long time. So younger dogs can handle more protein because their body is young and vital and is pretty clean and is able to keep up with the extra waste that's created with a protein meal. So when we eat fruit, it digests very cleanly. There's very little acid waste. There's very little burden on the body. And so if you have an older dog that's already dealing with a lot of backlog of burden, we want to give them as little extra burden as possible. So we'll put them on more fruit. Sometimes we'll even start them off on all fruit for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days if they have like a really serious condition. And that's just going to allow the body to catch up on that backlog. Whereas with puppies, most of the time we're dealing with something that maybe they have some little minor issues. Maybe they have some like little skin issues or something like that, but they don't really have big, blown out disease conditions. And so their body can handle more meat. And we can, of course, be completely flexible with this. If we have a puppy, like, for example, Daisy, when I got her from the shelter, she had mange. She was missing 75% of the fur on her body. She had like big patches of like this crusty black and white, just like fungusy stuff. So I put her on all fruit, even though she was a puppy. She was less than 6 months old. We put her on all fruit until her skin cleared up. But then after that, we just moved her, once we got her to the point where she was healthy, then we moved her to more 2 or 3 days of meat per week. And it can be easier to maintain the weight of a puppy. Puppies are very active, so meat is going to be a lot more calorie dense. So, if you have a young, very active puppy and you're doing 3 meat days versus 2 meat days, it may be easier to maintain their weight on the 3 meat days just because they're getting more calories across the week. But with the seniors, they tend to be, lower activity level, calmer, and so they don't need the extra calories. So those extra calories just end up being extra burden for their body and an extra amount of time that the body has to digest and all of that. So the more the body needs to heal, the more we want to lean towards the fruit. And the younger they are, the more we can kind of lean into the protein a little bit more.
Great. Yeah, great explanation. Yeah, I wanted to also touch on the importance of having bones in the meats when we do the meat days, because I know a lot of people will sort of skip that or not be cautious against doing that, be worried that they're gonna choke on it or whatever. So I'd love for you to just talk a little bit more about why bones are such an important aspect of the meat days when they do consume that.
Yeah, we kind of touched on that earlier, but let's get into a little detail on that. So the bone is the alkaline element of the meal. So proteins are acids, and when we eat protein, we need something to balance that chemistry, that acid chemistry. So when an omnivore or a carnivore eats meat, they always eat the bone, and the bone provides that alkaline material to balance the acids of the protein. If we feed a dog only on bones, with just like little scraps of meat just attached to the bone, the dogs will actually thrive. They'll live very long, healthy lives. But if we feed a dog on no bone, just meat, they'll actually die very, very young. And it's because they're just not getting that alkaline material that is essential for literally every tissue in the body. So the strength and structure of the muscles is dependent upon the alkaline minerals. The bones, the teeth, the hair, your blood, literally everything in the body requires alkaline minerals, and every process of the body is acidic. So the body is always in need of those minerals. And so if we start giving them, especially like if you're feeding all meat and you're doing all meat and no bone, then all they're getting is acids, no source of alkaline, and then, things can get bad very quickly. So, one of the things that I always encourage people to do is, just kind of take a deep breath and just think about what would happen in nature if an animal, caught a wild prey. If your dog went out there and caught a wild bird or a bunny, is there going to be somebody out there to remove the bones for them? Is there going to be somebody there to chop the bones up for them? No, of course not. They've been doing this for thousands of years. They've got this, they've got the anatomy to handle it. They've got jaws that are capable of chewing the bones. They don't have jaws like we do. We have very weak jaws that move side to side. They have like a jaw that's more like a scissor that just, cuts right through the bone. And so, it's a very natural process for them, but it's a very scary process for us. So, those first few times you just kind of have to like rein it in, face the fear, just, and I always say like, never leave your dog unattended when you're feeding them. Just if you're giving them a meat meal with a bone, just make sure that you're there to watch them. Cause anything can happen. Even with them eating kibble, they can choke on a piece of kibble. So, you should always just be there to watch your dog, but, just trust them that they have their own natural instincts. They know what they're doing and, this is totally natural for them. But, just always, cooked bone is toxic. It's indigestible. So we never want to give them cooked bones, only raw. And, the raw bone is very soft. It's very easy to digest, but when bone is cooked, it hardens and becomes indigestible. So that's why we hear about like the dog getting sick from the chicken bone, because it was a cooked chicken bone. But raw bones are perfectly safe. They're absolutely essential. You cannot do without them.
Yeah, that's great. And just another important consideration to have when it comes to bones is just modeling what your particular dog would be able to find and kill in the wild if it were doing that. So if we're giving them giant, if you're giving your Chihuahua a giant cow bone, that's going to be a big difference of what that would, maybe it'll stumble across that in the wild. I mean, Chihuahua is quite a difference from what a wild model would truly be, but just to recognize that that's not necessarily designed for it. So it could introduce problems just based on the size of it. And then another aspect of just how the bone has been cut. So if it's been cut at all. So if it's been cut by a bone saw, it's going to have jagged edges, which could introduce problems. So just be mindful of that in what you're feeding them.
Yeah, that's an excellent point too. And with the sawed bones, the biggest problem with the sawed bones is like, say you're feeding your dog like a beef neck bone, which is fine. You can give your dog beef neck bones. You just want to always watch them while they're eating it. But what'll happen is the beef neck bone will be large. It's a very dense bone. So they're not going to chew on it like they do with like a chicken bone. Like a chicken bone, they're going to just go chomp, 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 and it's going to be, down the hatch in a few bites. But with a beef neck bone, or, if you were to give them like a beef leg bone or something like that, it's a very dense bone. They're not digesting that. And so you want to make sure that they're not going to swallow any pieces, get it caught in their throat or anything like that. So that's the danger with the cut bones, is that it's cut in a way that would allow them to potentially swallow a small piece that they wouldn't naturally be able to break off with their teeth. So that's where we run into issues with like dogs getting obstructions or choking or anything like that, is because they've been given this sawed bone that is too dense for them to digest, and then they get it stuck in their digestive system. So with the bones, we always want to be like you said, looking for prey that was more naturally suited to their size. So for example, if you have a Chihuahua, you might go with the Cornish hen, which is a smaller chicken, versus a turkey bone, right? A big golden retriever can easily chew on a turkey leg, and their teeth are going to handle that fine. Their digestive tract's going to handle that fine. But the smaller, little Yorkie might not be able to chew through that turkey bone. So just try to pair your meat to that. But that being said, you'd be surprised how much they can eat. Like I've had little Chihuahuas, like 6-pound Chihuahuas, that had absolutely torn up a turkey leg. And then I've had, 20-pound miniature Schnauzers that struggled with the bigger chicken bones. So you have to a little bit use judgment with your particular dog. Like if you have a senior dog that's missing a lot of its teeth, go with the smaller bones, go with the softer bones, like the wing bones, go with the Cornish hens, go with fish that's, softer bones, and stay away from anything from a larger animal. But in general, my preference is always for chicken and fish to be the primary meats, because those are the most closely matched to what we find wild prey. And then obviously if you can get like wild sources for wild game, things like hare, rabbit, ducks, just any kind of smaller creatures, mice, things like that. Those are all great too. But in our group, we try to make it as friendly to everybody as possible. So it's like we predominantly teach people how you can walk into your regular grocery store and just buy what you need at, just your regular everyday grocery store, so that anybody can do it. But you obviously can, if you have sources for other meats within that kind of range, you just always want to be thinking about, is this something that my dog could realistically catch out in the wild? And so for most dogs, that's going to be a chicken or smaller. For, some of the larger dogs, a turkey or smaller.
Yeah, great points there. So just so we don't skip over our beloved cats, I'd love to shift towards cats, and much of the same principles are going to apply, but there are definitely some nuances because we're dealing with a full carnivore versus an omnivore. So yeah, I'd just love to briefly go over the differences between feeding cats as opposed to what we've already discussed in regards to dogs.
Yeah, so with our cats, like you said, they're carnivores, so we can't give them the fruit like we can with the dogs. Some cats will eat a little bit of fruits, but it's not really something that they're able to get a lot of nourishment out of, because they have an extremely short digestive tract, and fruit needs a long digestive tract to move through to digest properly, whereas meat needs a very short digestive tract. So the cats are going to be basically raw, properly sourced meats, removing the fat, same as we do with the dogs. And then we're going to utilize fasting. Whereas with the dogs, we can utilize fruits a little bit to help with the cleaning out. With the cats, we're limited to just fasting. So we want to make sure that their regular meals are proper for their physiology. And then we want to utilize fasting as needed to help them heal through any backlogs of waste, and help, get any old waste cleared out, and disease conditions cleared up. So we feed our cats predominantly chicken. Sometimes I get some fish for them, but it's at this point probably about 90% chicken. And how we prepare it is we remove the skin, we trim as much of the fat as possible, and then we portion it up into cat-sized portions. Most cats are going to eat between 7 and 10% of their body weight. Some of them will be a little bit less than that. But I think most of my cats are at like 7 or 8% right now. So, that might look like 6 or 7 ounce portions for your kind of standard 7-pound cats. And maybe if you have like a 10-pound cat, you might be closer to 10 ounces. And if you have a little tiny kitten, like my tiny kitten, she only gets 3 ounces. Basically it's pretty simple for the cats. It's just going to be their protein and then periodic fasting days. So for my cats, I do one fasting day every roughly 7 to 10 days, and we do randomize it. So it's not just every 7 days you get a fasting day. We shift it up here and there so that they don't beg as much. Like if you're on a very set regimented feeding schedule where you're feeding your cat every single morning at 6 a.m., then they're going to wake you up every single morning at 6 a.m. because they're going to demand their food at 6 a.m. So one of the things that we do is we vary our feeding times and we vary our fasting times. And by doing this, we've created a situation where our cats never beg for food. They never wake us up. They never, disturb us, and, or like they're not annoying us in the kitchen when we're making dinner or anything like that, because they know their feeding time is when we say all kittens to your crates. So instead of them being kind of like on a timer, they're on a command. So like we feed all of our cats in their individual crates. And so we can literally just say all kittens to your crates, and they all go racing in, and then they get excited that But that's the one thing that I think a lot of people should try to implement, because otherwise your cats can be very annoying with jumping up on the counters and just kind of driving you insane if you get into the habit of feeding them every day at a certain time. But yeah, for the cats, it's pretty simple. It's just proteins, trim as much fat as possible, and utilize some fasting, some regular fasting, and then utilize some therapeutic fasting, extended fast as needed for the healing process.
Yeah, and I noticed in this guide it lists a little bit less recommended regular fasting than dogs, like perhaps not maybe once every other week, as opposed to once every week, or more with the dogs. So yeah, can you just explain the thought process behind that one?
Yeah, so with the dogs, the reason that we fast as regularly as we do is because they're shifting between the fast digesting fruits and the slow digesting meats. So with the with that transition from one food to the next, you need to add that digestion day, so that day for the body to just clear out. With the cats, because they're eating protein every single day, their digestion is moving at a very steady pace. And excuse me, cats also have a much shorter digestive tract because they're true carnivores. Their meat moves through much faster than the dogs. Dogs are omnivores, so they have a little bit longer of a digestive tract to facilitate the digestion of the fruit. And so they're kind of like split down the middle. They're not as long as a human, but they're not as short as a cat. So they have this longer period where the meat is in their system. So with the cats, their transit time is very quick. So you don't need that, extra time in between the meat meals. So we're just utilizing the fasting day in order to just allow for a little bit of a break, a little bit of cleanup, and also just to mimic what would happen in the wild. So in the wild, they would not always have a successful hunt. So they might not eat every single day. So they would have days where they maybe have a big feast meal, and then they might not even try to hunt for several days because they're full. Or they might have a few days where they're just eating bugs, and so they're just getting a little bit of food. And then they might have a day, like a famine day, a day of fasting. And so we're just trying to facilitate that without making things way too complicated for the average person. So, if we really wanted to get as close to nature as possible, we might vary their meal sizes more and say like, oh, we're going to give you a whole Cornish hen today, and then 3 days of fasting, and then we're going to give you, just 1 ounce today and 1 ounce tomorrow, and then but then that gets really confusing for people, and it's hard to keep track of. And most of us are working, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, so we just need to not have to be thinking that hard about it. So by just having kind of same portion every day and then a fasting day, it gets closer to that natural model, but without having to really go crazy with the randomization. I mean, obviously you're welcome to randomize more and, maybe shift things up, have a larger meal here and then a smaller meal there, just to make it a little bit more like what they would get in nature. Or we feed 1 meal per day for our cats. And, same thing we were explaining about the dogs is the meat meals in particular, we feed 1 meal per day. But, if you wanted to with the cats, because cats might hunt, say, they might just get like a couple of bugs one day, right? So they might be eating very small meals sporadically throughout the day. So you could, if you wanted to, split it up into multiple meals. And then, have one day where you're giving them 1 big meal and then another day where you're giving them a bunch of smaller meals. But I find that it's very, very complicated, hard to keep track of. And so we just kind of simplify things down. And the benefit to just doing 1 meal per day for the cats is that the rest of the day, their body is getting that time to clean and heal. So it's kind of like adding in extra fasting days, or like how in the dog world, we can give them extra fruit days to give their body a little bit more digestive break and allow more cleaning to occur on those days. With the 1 meal per day, the cat is getting all the digestion done within a small window, and then the rest of the day, everything, all the other energy available to the body is going into cleaning and healing. So it just allows them to keep up on their waste backlogs a little bit better.
That's great. Thank you for that. And I would imagine, but just to clarify, so with transitioning, well, I guess I'll mention first. So we are going to move to questions from the audience here in just a minute. So if you have any questions and you want to go ahead and get lined up, want to go ahead and raise your hand and I can get your mic open, please feel free to do so at any moment. But the question I was asking about transitioning cats, is it going to use that same model with the dogs? Obviously, with instead of fruit, you would do meat, but have a day of fasting and then move to just offering them the meat until they get to that space where they're consuming that. Would that be the same model you'd use with cats?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I do. When I bring in a new cat, I always just do 24 hours of fasting and then just offer them the meat. Sometimes I do have, like, in that cat guide, I do have transitioning tips for cats, because some cats will be really stubborn and some owners are really scared about fasting their cat for more than a day. So if you have a cat that, say, doesn't take to the food right away, we do have some transitioning tips in there, like utilizing stepping from, say, a kibble to a canned food first to let them get used to the texture, and then maybe from that to the chicken baby food, which is just really simple ingredients. But it's still cooked meat, so it's closer to smell that they're used to, but then it's getting closer to the texture of the raw, and then you start to kind of mix the raw in with that. So for cats that are really stubborn, or maybe they're just holding out, because cats can be like pretty stubborn when it comes to changing. Dogs are much easier. So we do have some tips in there for things to do if your cat isn't taking to it right away. But I do always recommend that people at least first try to just transition them over and just do the fasting day, and then just offer them the meat, and just give them at least 2 or 3 days of just offering them the fresh meat each day. If beyond 2 or 3 days they're still not eating it, then you might go back and go a little slower by kind of mixing it in with their existing food and try and transition them a little slower. But for the most part, most cats are going to just take to the raw food, and so don't overcomplicate things if you don't have to.
Awesome, thanks for that. And I see in the cat guide there's a bit more emphasis on organ meat. So I'm wondering if you could explain a bit more on the importance of organ meat when feeding cats, and why if that's not nearly as important with dogs, or maybe I'm misreading that.
Yeah, so it is still important for both dogs and cats, but with the dogs, because they're eating fruit, they're getting a wide variety of nutrients in the fruit, and so we have a little bit more flexibility in terms of them being able to just pick up what they need out of the fruit. So if we don't give them their organs as often, they're not really going to get like a deficit of anything. They're not going to be missing anything because they're just going to get it in the fruit. With the cats, because they're only eating the protein, we do need to make sure that they're getting at least some variety of organs, just to give them different nutrients. So what I always recommend is, if you can, just get whole chicken, have that be your primary meat, because it's going to come with the organs that you need. If you're, sometimes it doesn't come with the heart and the liver and all of that. Like sometimes they call it the gizzards. Sometimes that is missing, or the, not gizzards, the giblets is, sometimes they say like with giblets or without giblets. So the giblets are the organ meats. Sometimes it won't come with that, but then you'll be able to buy at the grocery store a tray of chicken hearts and a tray of chicken gizzards and a tray of liver, and then you can just put it into it. But the endocrine glands and the lungs and the kidneys, all of that is actually still in the back frame of the chicken, regardless of whether it comes with the giblets or not. So you're at least always getting those for some different vitamins and nutrients. So that's why I always recommend it. Just make chicken your primary. You can also whole fish is pretty much always going to have the organs intact. So that's another good source of getting the organs. And then you can also supplement with other organs. But again, I try to keep it paired to the reasonable sized prey for that animal. So, you can feed them a little bit of beef kidney, beef liver, things like that. But if you think about it in nature, like, is a cat really going to take down a cow? Just no, right? So we're going to try to avoid giving them, the larger prey if we can. I mean, if that's the only organs you can find, absolutely fine. Just, utilize them. But if you can avoid it, you want to try to go with the smaller prey. And like for your cats, if you only have like one cat, you might even consider doing like Cornish hen. It's a little bit even closer to a natural prey that they would hunt, because the Cornish hens are usually about maybe 1.5 to 2 pounds, whereas a full-size chicken is maybe 5 pounds. So it's closer in weight to like a 7-pound cat. It's a little bit larger for them. But they absolutely can eat all of the bones of even the full-size chicken. Like my cats get like full-size chicken drumstick bones, and they'll eat everything except for like the very center of the bone, which is pretty dense. But they'll eat like, the breastbone, the wing bones, all of that without issue.
Yeah, that's good to know. As far as, because I know some people in the group have asked about this, but what about grinding up the meat with the bones, and when would you want to use something like that? And obviously this is not what they would do. They're not running around with blenders in nature, so this is not what they're going to be doing. But where would be a reason why somebody might want to employ something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you know, we're a lot of times have our animals on a kibble or something that has created disease conditions. And some of those disease conditions might be loss of teeth, damage to the teeth, or swelling of the gums. And so sometimes, especially with me, where I'm getting dogs from the shelter that are 12 or 13 or 14 years old, they might have had a dental cleaning where the vet ripped out a lot of their teeth. And so they might not have sufficient teeth to actually chew like they would in the wild. Like in the wild, they don't lose teeth like they do on the kibble. This is a commercial food. It's a cooked food issue. So if we're starting out from a deficit where the animal is missing some of those teeth, then we might need to utilize some assistance, basically, to make sure that they can get the meat in. So generally, I try, if they have at least half of their teeth, and if they have at least 2 molars that are top and bottom that meet, I try to at least give them something to chew on, because it's very important for their mental stimulation that they get to chew. It's also important for the remaining teeth that they have, that their teeth stay clean and that their teeth stay strong, is that they actually work their teeth. So I try to always keep something for them to chew on. So like I had Lucky, he only had like 14 teeth remaining, but he had 2 molars at the back, and so he could chew on a little bit. So I would give him like a chicken wing. It's like a softer bone. So I'd grind up, most of his food, but then give him like just a chicken wing to chew on, so that he gets some of that stimulation and that exercise and all of that. But yeah, if you have an animal that's older that maybe is struggling to chew the chicken bones because of teeth issues, that would be the primary reason that we usually end up grinding. And then the other reason is sometimes just from all the damage of the kibble, sometimes their digestion will just be weak. And so if an animal, say we give them their meat meal and then they poop out large pieces of bone, then we know, okay, their stomach is struggling to digest this. And so we'll grind for a while just to let it'll be easier on the digestion, is having smaller pieces of bone for it to dissolve than having big pieces. So usually in those cases, we would grind maybe for the first 3 months or 6 months, not continuously, but just for the first 3 to 6 months, let the digestive system heal some. And then as the digestion heals, we'll start to slowly incorporate some bone, and we'll test it. So, say we have a dog that's been on ground for 6 months. I'm not going to just go straight from ground to giving them a drumstick. I'll give them maybe a chicken wing with their ground. It'll be like 75% ground, 25% this chicken wing. Watch and make sure that digests okay. If that digests okay, then we'll do like 50-50, and then, we'll work our way up to it and just make sure that each step along the way that the bone is actually digesting. But yeah, those are the 2 primary reasons that, so basically tooth issues or digestion issues.
Great. Thanks for that. Yeah, so we've talked a lot, and I know your focus is mostly on dogs and cats, but I was wondering if you could maybe touch on a little bit of just how to apply these same principles to any species that we're in the care of, and maybe some examples that you could provide in that area.
Yeah. So even though our group is, the natural diet for dogs and cats, we are open for, any other animals for people to discuss. And so sometimes we'll have conversations about goats or horses, ducks. We had one person who, she has her dogs and cats on it, but she also has ducks, and one of her ducks got attacked, and it actually was very severely injured to the point where its organs were exposed. And so, she followed the exact same principles that we follow with everything else. She brought the duck inside to a safe place, gave it only water, no food for 24 hours, and then just gave it very easy to digest fruits for the next few days. And it took a while, but the injury healed completely, and she did keep the duck separated from the other ducks while it was healing. But basically just the idea of just not interfering with the body. The body is capable of healing itself. The body, gets to work on healing right away. So as long as we don't interfere, we don't stop, we don't put creams and ointments and cover things up and, make it so that the body can't do what it needs to do, then the body's going to heal. So this works for every species. The key things we just have to do is recognize, number one, that the symptoms themselves are created by the body to facilitate healing. So we want to not interfere with them, not do anything that's going to forcibly stop those symptoms. And then the second thing we want to do is look at what we're feeding. Are we feeding as close as possible to the natural model? Are we making sure that their food is free from contaminants, free from toxins, oils, things like that? So like one of the things that you see, like, for example, with chickens is a lot of the chicken feed that people will buy at the store has added oils. So a chicken obviously has no facility to create a processed, heavily, industrialized product like oil, but they're spraying the food with this oil for who knows why, probably preservatives or something like that. But so that can cause a lot of health issues. So we want to make sure that we're removing anything that might be unnatural and that might be facilitating the burden on the body that is leading to the symptoms. So instead of trying to address and suppress the symptoms, we're going to look at what's causing the symptoms and try to remove those causes. So we'll look to, if wherever we can, we'll try to look for, say, like a wild study. Like there's a lot of scientific bodies that will go out and study the diet of XYZ animal in the wild. And if we can't find that particular species, we'll try to look at the greater family of the species. So for example, like with dogs, you can look at wolves and coyotes in the wild, and they still have the same anatomy and physiology. So if we look at what they're eating, we're going to get a pretty good idea of what whatever the species should be eating. And so that's what we just try to do, is just get as close to what they should be eating in nature and just don't suppress the healing symptoms as they come. Let the body heal as it needs to. Let the body work its way through the symptoms without suppression.
Wonderful. Yeah. When in doubt, let nature be your guide. And it always helps. So yeah, thanks for that. And yeah, I will just pass it off and see if anyone here on the call has any questions they want to ask Lauren while we're so fortunate to have her for this time. If you have any specific questions related to your loved ones or anything that we've discussed today, now would be a great time to bring them forward.
Maybe before we get started, if I could just take a second, I'm just going to grab a little bit more water.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Yeah, and while, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I will call on you. And while she is grabbing a sip of water, I just want to share some of the resources that you can find online regarding, if I can pull it up. Where is it? Just her website, therawkey.com, is a phenomenal resource to use both for our health and the health of our furry friends. So here you can see the website, therawkey.com. And if you're looking for those, of course, there's different aspects. The people's key would be concerning our health, tons of articles and great things about that, as far as getting us back to our natural state. But then what we've spoken on today is the animal's key. And this has the natural guide for dogs and cats. So the things that I was referencing here are there. They're amazing references to keep handy, just to give a quick guide on what to do and how to approach things and how to approach feeding. So that's wonderful as well. And of course, you can find the contact information for Lauren here on this page to schedule a more intensive consultation with her if you need more help with your pets. And then the Facebook group, which I also shared a link, is this is such an amazing resource, and Lauren does such a good job at fielding questions here continuously. I mean, I don't know where she finds all the time to care for all of these animals that she does and to help so many people in this way. But the Natural Dog and Cat Diet group with therawkey.com is the group. I posted the link in the post that you can find, and here is just a way to ask questions on what you're experiencing, and Lauren is always very quick to answer and helping. So people will share what they're going through, so you can actually go through and you search on this group if you have a particular ailment or things that you're encountering, and chances are somebody else has asked this question before, and if not, then feel free to ask that question. And it just adds to the discussion. It adds to the learning process so that we can become better accustomed to caring for our loved ones in this way. Just wanted to share that. And I see that Sarah has a question, so I'll go pass it off to you. Or Lauren, did you have something you wanted to share on the group itself?
No, I think you covered it. I would just say, we, our goal with the group is to give enough information so that everybody can learn the principles so that you can go out and teach them yourself. Like, that's my goal. That's why I dedicate as much time to it as I do, is because, I'm trying to train up other people that can go out, like, exactly like what you're doing right now is, just getting the information out to people, helping other people understand. And, so that's why we do what we do with the support group, is just, free education so that we can have an army of people out there kind of changing the entire mindset and getting, just taking down the food industrial complex from just being, educated consumers.
Yeah. Empowering each other to empower ourselves and empower the world around us. That's the way to go for sure. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate all that you do. We'll pass it over to Sarah, Sarah was actually the one who recommended this group, and I saw through her to jump on. So really appreciate you and that inspiration, Sarah, but I'll pass it on to you for what you have to share.
Cool. Hi. Hi, Lauren. Hi, Justin.
Hi.
I'm so glad how all these groups I'm in, how we all cross over. It's so cool. But yeah, I don't know. I just came into the chat about maybe 10, 15 minutes ago. So if you've already covered it, then no problem. But I think the biggest thing that was alarming to me is about the whole vet industry was about like an animal that is being euthanized, and just the difference between letting an animal pass on their own versus taking them to be quote unquote put to sleep, and how they say that, oh, they don't suffer and, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if you've covered that, but I don't know if you could cover that like a little bit briefly here about why it's so important to put the dog on the natural diet, as you've already talked about, but also like why it's so important to let them pass on their own in their own time, in their own way. So I don't know if that's okay to cover or talk about that, but I think it's really important because we all have to deal with that at some point, losing our animal, and what's the right thing to do, especially when we're in a panic because we don't want them to suffer, So anyways, that was what I had. I thought that'd be good for the group.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's something that we did not talk about, and it's a very difficult subject to talk about, and it is kind of just, the medical industry has marketed this product, this euthanasia product, as the compassionate way to go, and you're cruel if you don't do it. And, it's just become so readily accepted that nobody really even thinks about what it is or what's happening or whether it really is in the best interest of our dogs. And, to be perfectly honest, it is not in the best interest of our dogs. It is in the best interest of, the salesperson, and it's maybe in the best interest of us not having to maybe, watch some of the processes of a natural death. And, because there are some times when a dog, especially a dog that's been fed kibble a long time, they might have symptoms on their way out, and those symptoms might be scary. Like, on occasion, a dog will have a seizure as part of the natural dying process in the last 24 to 48 hours of life. And so the industry has really kind of jumped on that and utilized it to sell this product that they sell. And they've marketed this idea of euthanasia as oh, your dog's just being put to sleep. But what's really happening is the dog is being given a paralyzing sedative. So they're still aware of what's going on, but they're just not able to move. So if you can imagine, if you were given a date rape drug and you can know what's going on around you, but you're just frozen and you can't run away and you're scared and you can't get away. So that's the first stage of it. And then they're given a poison that, shuts down their entire body pretty rapidly. But that is being poisoned, right? So you're paralyzed and then you're being poisoned. And so we've been taught that this is just some very peaceful way to pass off, but that's just not, when we're looking objectively at reality, that's just not the case. That's not what's happening. They're giving a paralyzing agent so that the dog can't cry out when the poison is injected, but the dog is not, immune to being poisoned, right? This is paralyzing agent doesn't make us immune to being poisoned. And so, we've normalized this idea, or I should say the vet industry has normalized this idea. And what they've done in the process of normalizing this, because it's a profitable product for them, right? It's like a $200, $300, $500 bill for them that they get in. And so they've normalized this and they've made it, even to the point where, it's almost like how during COVID, there were people out there bullying people for not injecting themselves with poison, right? Because you weren't protecting, you were being cruel, you were beating up on your granny or whatever. It's the same idea that the medical industry uses, that if you don't take our poisons, you are cruel and abusing your dog. If you don't take our vaccinations, you are cruel and abusing your dog. If you don't take our euthanasia drug, you're cruel and abusing your dog. If you don't take our antibiotics, they might kill your dog, but, you're cruel for not utilizing them. And so there's this idea that is, I think very predatory when you have an owner whose dog is passing, and then you come in and you put this pressure upon them to take this product, take this euthanasia drug, and they're preying upon that desperation that you feel, that you don't want your dog to suffer, that you don't want them to be uncomfortable, you don't want them to you don't want to watch the dying process. But in reality, the natural dying process is most of the time very peaceful. Even when it's not, it's far less scary for the dog to be there with you in its home, in its familiar surroundings, not in the place that it's always hated for its entire life. Because, how many dogs like to go to the vet? Your dog is usually going to be scared going to the vet. They're going to be in a strange place, surrounded by strange people, under, uncomfortable conditions when they're already not feeling well. And so, we're bringing them into this environment. But when we let them pass at home, it's very peaceful. It's very calm. They just, for most of my dogs. So I take in seniors, right? So the end result of that is that you're going to have a lot of dogs pass. If you're taking in dogs that are between 3 and 5 years of their natural lifespan, you're going to have a lot of dogs pass in your care. And so, I've watched a lot of dogs go through the natural dying process, and, of all of the dogs that have passed in my care, I've only had 3 that had any sort of symptoms that were kind of uncomfortable to watch. Mr. Bean, he had a seizure in the last 8 hours of his life, and it was a series of longer, drawn-out seizures. But that was just part of the natural dying process because he had seizures in the past that had healed. His body was weak in that area, and so as the body started to break down and the proteins were being put into the bloodstream and everything like that, that was the weak area. So it expressed in a little bit of symptoms there. But would I say that was traumatic to me? No. I mean, might it be traumatic to somebody else? It might be. But the medical industry has basically created this narrative where it's like your dog dying is always going to be this very traumatic thing, and you putting them to sleep, in your words, you euthanizing them is going to be this not traumatic thing. And it's just unfortunately a lie. It's just completely based on a lie. It's something to sell a product. And, in my opinion, it's cruel. It's cruel that they do this to the animal. It's cruel that they do this to the owner because they put the owner under this idea that by letting your dog pass naturally at home, you're being cruel, that you're being hurtful to your animal, that you're making them suffer, when it's the complete opposite of the truth. Dogs passing, it's a very natural process. They don't have the fear of it like we do. They, like when we have our dogs that are raw fed, usually they don't really even show any signs of passing other than weight loss up until the final 24 to 48 hours. And, they run around like puppies and play up until the last final days. So, the idea that they're suffering, I think is just, it's just not true. And it's just so hurtful to, I think, the owners that then, maybe you learn about it years later. Like, I had a dog when I was younger that we went the vet route. He had some sort of weird lung condition. Now I know it was just what I was feeding him. I was feeding him what I thought was like a good, healthy grocery store wet food, but it was just garbage. It was a garbage product, and it made him sick. And then we went to all of these experts. We ended up spending almost $30,000 on all of these different experts. They kept sending us to specialist after specialist after specialist. And then they told us, there's nothing we can do. So, your dog is suffering, and, we're going to euthanize the dog. And it was an extremely traumatic process for me. They were like, oh yeah, it's very peaceful. He's going to sleep. And it was nothing like that. It was, he started to spasm and panic, and you could see his eyes bugging out. And you could see that he was just clearly feeling like, he was being poisoned to death. And so that kind of always hung with me, but I still, even after that, believed in the veterinary kind of narrative that, it's the humane way to go, the nice way to go, and all of that. And it's just, it took a long time for me to realize that, no, it wasn't the humane way to go. It wasn't this kind of very, peaceful way that they're sending them off. It took actually for me to see dogs passing naturally in my care to see how peaceful death is compared to what that product really offers. So, I don't know. Hopefully that answers your question, Sarah. And it's a difficult thing to talk about because, you don't want anybody having to think about, like, did I do the wrong thing for my pet in the past that I didn't know, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for covering that. Yeah, and I've been through that process exactly as you said, and I still regret it to today, but, we have a new dog now, as you know, and he's been on the diet ever since we got him, which was over a year ago, and he's just thriving. And honestly, everything that you said that was going to happen, or everything that we could watch for, has, and it's just been, I just feel so much in integrity with, like, how we're doing things with both our dog and our cat. So thank you again for going over that. And thank you, Justin, for having this. I really appreciate you. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Appreciate you too. And yeah, it's a great topic to cover, and something for us to consider, and not to, as Lauren mentioned, not to take on this sort of shame or guilt based on decisions that we've made, but just to honor what happened so that we can move forward in a better way. So to recognize that, yes, because a lot of times I'm sure the solution to address whatever was leading them to this, what we consider life-threatening ailment, could have been addressed just by fasting. So to really go deeper into a level of fasting to cover something like that, and not immediately turn to what the vet is trying to sell. And forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. They're not doing it on purpose. This is just how they've been trained to think that that's the only solution. And then a lot of times people won't even be in the same room with them when they apply these euthanizing drugs, because they don't want to be there. So that's just adding more trauma to the situation for that animal, as in their last moments, they're not even with people that they're familiar with. So yeah, it's a good thing to really note in both of those cases.
Yeah. And, like you just pointed out, is one of the things that bothers me the most about it is that because the medical industry treats the healing symptoms created by the body as bad and wrong and requiring poisoning, they are often euthanizing dogs that are healing. So they're taking a dog that is going through a healing process, that is getting itself back to a state of health, and they're saying, your dog is dying because it's creating all these symptoms to heal itself, and so let's euthanize the dog. And so I can't tell you how many times I have talked to people whose dogs were going through just a healing crisis. They were just going through a healing event, and the vet convinced them that the dog was suffering and dying, and had they literally waited 24 or 48 hours, they would have had a healthy dog on their hands. But instead, they have a dead dog because the vet industry is just following this indoctrination that they're under, where, everything the body does is wrong and bad. And, everything gets, cured with the poisons that they apply to the body. And so, it's not just the euthanasia is a problem in itself, but just when they're utilizing it is, potentially catastrophic if you're euthanizing an animal that was really just going through a healing process.
Yeah, well said. So Lauren, I want to be mindful of your time because I know that you're quite busy. Are you flexible for just a little bit longer?
Yeah, let me just check my consultation schedule real quick, just to make sure I don't have anybody coming up.
Sure.
But I think we should be okay to go a little longer. Just a sec here.
Yeah, and while she's looking that up, if there's anyone else that has any questions or things, I've got one more question, but I want to make sure we pass it off to others to check in with that. So we'll just see if she's got a little bit more flexibility there.
Yeah, I'm good until 4:30.
Okay, great. Yeah, so is there anyone else on the call that has another question they want to ask Lauren while we have the gift of having her with us? Okay, no worries. I had one that popped up while we were talking about the traditional vet approach and the indoctrination there. So concerning, on the other end of the spectrum, concerning puppies, they push these ideas of parvo fears and all these other things where they're pushing the vaccines and whatever else. So what's your sort of thoughts and approach there amidst the conventional fear tactics that they use in saying, like, if you don't do this, your puppy's going to die and all this other kind of stuff?
Yeah, parvo is a great one to talk about because parvo is 100% a healing process. It is diarrhea and vomiting and fever. It is the body expelling waste and healing itself. And they've created this industry where you have to get these vaccines which poison the body, and then you have to get, if your dog tests positive for the parvo virus, then, you got to give them a whole bunch of antibiotics, and then the dog often dies from the antibiotics. And then they say, oh, well, they died from the parvo. And, we see this in the human medical industry too, with like flu drugs. We gave them, Tamiflu, and the person died, but their death doesn't get recorded as a Tamiflu death. It gets recorded as a flu death because legally the death certificate cannot list an unnatural cause of death. So it has to list whatever the natural cause is. So if you come in with diabetes, and then you're given a concoction of drugs and you die from those drugs, your cause of death listed on your death certificate is going to be diabetes or complications from diabetes rather than XYZ drug that they give you. And so the same thing happens in the veterinary industry, is basically the parvo is blamed for the death that is a result of the antibiotics and all the medications that are given to the dog to treat the parvo. So the parvo itself, so viruses are cellular debris, right? So if you have like a cold virus or a flu virus or a parvo virus, it just means that your body has been exposed to poison of varying forms. It could be like an acute poison, like ammonia or bleach or something like that, or it could be just a poisoning from the food you're eating, just from eating processed foods or just foods that are not appropriate to your physiology. So the more poisoned the body is, the more dead cell debris we have. That dead cell debris is just microscopic pieces of cells, and that's what they call a virus. And so if the body's been poisoned, we'll have a higher viral load, right? We'll have more broken pieces of cells that are what they call viruses. And so what happens a lot of times with puppies is you have a puppy that's going from mother's milk, which is a species appropriate food, which is not disease causing. And then we wean them on to kibble, and kibble is a poison. And so the body's natural response, if it's got enough vitality, is to create diarrhea and vomiting. Diarrhea and vomiting is the body expelling and healing from a waste product. If we move that dog to the vet and the vet takes a sample, then they will say, oh, this is positive for parvo, or this is positive for distemper, or this is positive for any one of these other bacteria that they blame for disease. These bacteria are always present in the body. They are a natural part of the body, but they increase when the body's been poisoned. So they'll say, oh, the dog has parvo, and then the dog will go under extreme treatment, just like we saw with COVID and the people being put on the ventilators, and the ventilators were killing people. So, we put them on this really extreme treatment, and then the dog dies, and then it's racked up as another parvo death. And so the cycle of just misinformation just continues to feed. And, we also see this with grapes. Feeding dog grapes is, in the medical industry, you're going to kill your dog if you feed them grapes. Whereas in our world, we give dogs with cancer, pounds and pounds and pounds of grapes. And the only thing that happens is that they heal from the cancer, because they've created the same self-fulfilling prophecy where, oh, my dog ate one raisin. I rush my dog to the vet. The vet says, oh, grapes, they're really poisonous. We're going to put your dog on a medication that's known to cause kidney failure and a medication that's known to cause liver failure. And we're going to put you on saline, IV saline, which is known to cause death. And then if your dog dies, we're going to say, oh, it was that grape. It was that one raisin that they ate that killed them. It wasn't the pharmaceutical that is known to cause kidney failure that gave them the kidney failure. It's not the medication that was known to cause liver failure that gave them the liver failure that caused them to actually die. No. It was the one grape that they ate. And so it's this self-fulfilling, because they control the narrative, because they control the information, they can just say, well, our drugs never cause death. It's this, harmless material, or it's this, it's this virus, it's this grape. And so it just, the industry just feeds itself by just being able to control the narrative and just being seen as the authority figure. Whatever they say is right. And it's unfortunate, because we've put into power a for-profit business and made it the authority figure on health. And we've done this in human health, and we've done this in veterinary health. This is a for-profit business that only profits when you are sick or when your animal is sick, but we are making them out to be, basically a god that we worship. And we say, the doctor, follow doctor's orders, doctor knows best. We have all these TV shows like ER that have, doctors are heroes and all of that. And so we, have this just entire socially constructive narrative where the doctor is always right, and therefore anything that the doctor wants to sell us is always going to be right.
Boom. Mic drop moment. Thank you for that. Yeah, so that's a great answer to that, and I appreciate the clarity there. Yeah, so I'll just pass it off again and see if anyone else wants to jump in for maybe one or more questions before we wrap up. So if anyone has any, feel free to jump in. Hey, Luna, go ahead. Yeah, you just have to click that same button again to open up your mic. There you go.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Yes, I have a small dog that's about 5.5 pounds, and I'm just wondering, I'm treating him with CBD oil for seizures. Is there anything else that I can do? Because he's still having seizures. He has 1 or 2 a month, and it's sporadic. It doesn't go like, it'll stop for a little bit and then it'll just pipe up again. And I cook his own food. So including the meats and the vegetables, and I'm only feeding him carrots, potatoes, sweet potatoes, and squashes. That's it as far as vegetables go.
Okay. So, first of all, with seizures, we need to stop all meat entirely until the seizures stop. They need to be on all fruits. Second, so potatoes, sweet potatoes are really terrible for dogs. They should never, ever eat any of them. Same with carrots. They're starch. Dogs don't have any ptyalin in their saliva, and they don't chew their food. So they don't actually have any ability to digest starches. They can digest fruits, but they cannot digest starches. So when we feed them things like potatoes and sweet potatoes, that's going to ferment in the digestive tract, and that fermentation is putting alcohol into the system. And so that alcohol is keeping the body at a chronic state of disease. So we want to stop the carrots and the potatoes, get them onto fruit, and then after the seizures stop, then we can add the meat back in. But meat should always only be raw. When we're cooking our meat, we're making it completely indigestible for the dog. And again, if you're cooking the meat, I would assume you're also not including the bone. So I don't know if you caught the part in the beginning where we're talking about how bone is essential, but bone is the alkaline element of the food. So when they're eating meat, they absolutely have to have bone as part of their meat meals. And so if they're getting a cooked meat, they're getting something that's not really digestible. It's very acidic, and then you're missing out on that alkaline element to balance that. So seizures are basically the body is so backed up with waste that it's triggering the nerves. And the CBD oil is a neurotoxin. So it's not something that we want to be giving on any sort of regular basis. It's okay if we use it occasionally, like in extreme cases where a dog is in extreme pain or something like that. But, or in the moment, like if a dog is in a seizure, we can use the medication in that moment to help relax the body so that the seizures calm down. But we don't want to be giving it on a daily basis, because then we're just putting in a poison into the body every single day. So we've done a bunch of seizure dogs. Actually, I'll show you. This is Mr. Bean right there. So he had seizures. It took about 9 months for the seizures to stop fully. His were very regular. They were 6 weeks apart. And so what happened was when we first started, he was one of my first, he was like within the first 10 dogs that I had taken in. And so we were still experimenting a little bit, trying to refine things. We didn't know exactly what direction to go with the seizures. So we started him off with just fish, because I figured that was an easier protein. But then we realized after a while the seizures were still continuing. So then we moved him to entirely fruits. And then from the point we moved him to entirely fruits to the point where the seizures stopped entirely was about 5 or 6 months. What we found is some dogs respond more quickly than others. But what we do is we just put them on entirely fruits until the seizures stop, until we're sure that the seizures stop. And then we'll introduce one meat meal once a week, and we'll see how they go with that. And then we usually will keep them on one meat meal for at least 6 months before adding any additional meat meals.
Okay. So any fruits? Is there any rules as far as the fruits go?
Yeah, so pretty much anything that we can eat, they can eat. Our primary fruit that we feed is bananas. Those are really good quality, high calorie density, and it's very easy to get ripe bananas because they actually do ripen off the tree. So I tend to make our primary fruit bananas, and it's also very affordable. You can pretty much get it anywhere in the world. But other fruits that you can feed are papayas, mangoes, peaches, plums, grapes, berries, all sorts of berries. Some dogs will eat oranges, others won't. Melons, watermelon, cantaloupe, honeydew, the dogs really love, especially the watermelon. The dogs really seem to go crazy for that. The only thing to keep in mind with the watermelon is that it's very low in calories. So we want to be balancing some of the denser fruits like the bananas with the watermelon. Just having a little bit of variety. So you might have for a 5.5 pound dog, it's about roughly the size of Charlie. He's about 6 pounds. So Charlie eats usually 3 bananas for the day. Sometimes I'll give him a couple of dates as treats in between. He might have, for a watermelon, he might have about 15 ounces of watermelon, maybe a little bit more than that. And for a meat meal, he might have like 8 or 9 ounces. On the feeding guide, we have like a list of different foods that you can feed. And then I also have a food combining chart. So if you want to come over to the dog group, I just, put up a little post just saying, you're new to the group and you want the food combining chart, and we'll give you that. And that lists all the different fruits. And it'll tell you which ones pair well together. So generally when I feed fruits, we feed just 1 or 2 fruits per meal. We try to keep the meals pretty simple because, as I was saying before, it's like in nature, they're going to just eat at the tree until they're full. So, I might do like apples and bananas together, or I might do like blueberries and bananas together. But generally it's not going to be more than maybe 2 or occasionally 3 fruits. But you can do variety across the week. So maybe like Monday is banana day, and then Tuesday is watermelon day, and then Wednesday is you got some good peaches, so you'll do a peaches day, and then Thursday, maybe you got a bag of grapes for them, and so you can kind of mix it up that way. And then they can also have some of the savory fruits, or what we typically will call vegetables, but they're actually fruits, like things like tomatoes, bell peppers, cucumbers, zucchini. They can also have avocados. They can have raw nuts and seeds and nut and seed butters. So sometimes I'll give them like a little treat, like, if you have the Kong toys where they like to lick the stuff out of, and I'll put a little bit of like almond butter or nut butters or something like that in it. They can have some dried fruits as well. So a lot of times for training treats, I'll do things like dried mango or dried banana slices, peaches and plums and things like that. Just if you're buying store-bought dried fruit, just watch out for sulfur. Sometimes they'll add sulfur to them, so just try to avoid that. But yeah, generally just the same things that we eat, same fruits that we can eat, they can eat.
Well, and everything that you've said makes so much sense now, because my dog Jax is 10 years old, and I've had problems with his food since the very beginning. Like that first year, I think I tried every little kibble that was on the market, and he totally refused any kibble. But he has, to this day, still a sensitive stomach, to the point where he doesn't eat for 24, sometimes 36 hours, where he just absolutely refuses no matter what I put down for him. And this has been silico for 10 years, right? So I've kind of graduated to doing his own food out of necessity, because I thought there was something, wrong with the food. And we all know that there is a lot wrong with commercial food for pets, even our own foods. So I'm well aware of all that.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that what I was feeding him, the vegetables I was feeding him because of the starches, obviously contributed to the sensitivities that he has. And so I'm thanking you very much for giving me this information to go ahead and do more natural, based on like what I eat as far as fruits go. I'm going to try it. I'm praying that he's not too old to change. Um, because it's sweet. We all love fruit because it's got that little bit of sweetness. So I'm hoping that that's going to turn him around. But yes, I'm going to join your group, and thank you again for all of your
Yeah.
information. I
Well,
truly appreciate it.
and I'll just show you, like, every single one of these dogs was a senior when I got them. So,
Okay.
they all, like, I sometimes foster younger dogs, but the dogs that I keep are 10 years or older. So
Yeah.
all of my rescues, like I have Ruby. Oh, she's busy licking her crate because she ate just before. But I got her at 17 years old.
Wow.
And she'd been on kibble her whole life, and she took to the fruit right away, and now she absolutely loves the bananas and watermelon, and they chase me around the house whenever I'm eating my fruit. They're like, hey, why aren't you giving us any? Excuse me. So yeah, sometimes it takes them a little while, but it's really funny because I've actually found a lot of my senior cats and dogs take to the raw food way faster than the younger ones. So like I had one kitten that had only been on kibble for maybe 4 or 5 months, but it took me like 3 months to get him onto raw. He would just throw the raw food around the room and would not touch it, and only would eat his kibble that he'd come with. Whereas the senior cat that I had gotten off the streets, he was, raised on kibble his whole life. He'd been eating like the neighborhood community kibble bowls. But the first day I offered him raw meat, he was just like, yes, thank you. I will take this. Take that disgusting kibble away. Yeah, you'd be surprised how well seniors take to
I'm
it.
a little nervous with the raw meat because of all the stuff that we know that they put on our meats and stuff like that, and that's why I cooked it. Again, it's my fear, right? But I'm a vegetarian, but so I don't eat meat
Mm-hmm.
anymore as it is. But fish is something I may try with him. But I'll do the fruit for a couple of weeks and see how it goes, and then I'll start introducing the fish before I do the raw meat. But
Yeah, so you want with seizures, you definitely want to hold off on no fish, no meat, no proteins until the seizures stop.
okay,
So just the fruit.
okay, just keep them on fruit then.
Yeah,
Great.
just keep them on fruit. Like it might be like 6 months.
Yep, that's fine. Yep.
It depends on the dog, but just keep them on the fruits first until the seizures stop.
Super. Thank you very much again.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Luna, and thanks for that beautiful response.
No problem.
And yeah. I forgot what I was going to say. Well, yeah, I'll just pass it off and see if anyone else wants to jump in before we wrap up today. And maybe while we're waiting, if there is going to be anybody else, Lauren, I'd love to hear from you. So I shared the Rocky.com. I shared the Facebook group. Is there any other way where people can find you or to help support everything that you do? Because you do so much to provide for these animals and you spend so much time and effort trying to teach. So are there any other ways that people can find you or help support you in that way?
So I'm setting up a YouTube channel. I only have a few videos on there right now, but I hope to kind of expand that in the next, coming year. I'm working on a book, so hopefully I'll have that finished. It's a lot harder than you think, especially for me. Like I'm very good at answering questions on the spot, but that bigger picture, putting it all together into like a huge work is a little bit overwhelming, but slowly chipping away at that. But yeah, predominantly you'll find me in the Facebook group. We have the Natural Dog and Cat Diet group, and then I also run a human group as well as Terrain Model Refuge Germ Theory. So splitting my time between those two places keeps me very busy. I have like Instagram, but I don't post on it. Hopefully someday I'll be better about all of those things, but it's a lot just to answer everybody's questions in one place. So predominantly I do kind of hang out in the Facebook world, but I do obviously it's a lot of work doing what we do. So we do accept donations if anybody wants to throw us a couple bucks here or there to help us build out the information channels. And writing a book actually costs money to publish, and creating videos costs money and time and all of that. So if somebody just wants to give back, every little bit counts and is always appreciated. But otherwise, just come join us in the group, hang out with us. It's super fun, positive group, and everybody's we try to be really supportive of each other as everybody's going through all of this. So we're just always looking for more community members, more like-minded people who want to learn, who want to heal their pets, who want to just make this world a better place.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's such a beautiful thing to do. So as far as donating to you specifically, I was looking around at the website, and I know you mentioned you were having issues with it earlier. Okay. So what is the best way for people to do that if they did want to?
So I am trying to I had the donation form up on my website and it just broke on me. So I'm trying to get that fixed. So hopefully within the next couple of days, I'll have that fixed. But in the meantime, I could probably put my PayPal link up somewhere for people if they want to send in a donation. Maybe I'll just put it up on my website for now, just so it's the options there.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'll make sure to include that in the notes for this show wherever I post it as well.
Okay, very good. Yeah. And hopefully by the time the show is posted anywhere, I'll have that fixed. But yes, technical issues are my demise. I hate them.
Well, we truly appreciate you navigating that and for all that you do, and just for spending so much time with us to help answer questions and go over this in such detail. I mean, like I said, it's amazing to see how much time and effort you put into this. It truly shows that it's your passion, it's your love, and you embody that in every way. So just want to humbly give gratitude to you for this time spent today. And let you know that if there's anything else I can do to help in this way, please let me know.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on. It's like these opportunities to get out to speak with other people and, just get out into other audiences is just so huge because, I'm only one person. I can only spread the information so far, but if I can sit and have a conversation with 20 or 30 or 100, 200 people, that every single one of you can go out and spread this information and just help people heal. And, how many times do we walk down the street and we just, run into somebody that needs this kind of information? That's, their animals are suffering, they're suffering, their, loved ones are suffering. And so, the more people that we can have, feet on the streets, just out there knowing that there's a possibility, knowing where to direct people, even if you can't answer every question, like you still can point them in the right direction and get them to the information that they need to get there. So, I'm super grateful to anybody that, that you're willing to have me on the show to talk about this and just get this information out. So thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And yeah, that's a great suggestion there on sharing the work as far and as wide to anyone who needs this help. Because we're all working on breaking free from organized society and the mental constructs that have gotten us to deviate away from what is that which is simple and that which is true, to all this complicated mess. And so we've got to move back into that space. So grateful to have this resource here to do that. Luna, I see your mic is open. Did you have something else you wanted to add?
I did. Can you hear me, Justin?
Yeah, I can.
I just wanted to offer Lauren something. I don't know, Justin, if you remember that I have a humanitarian group that I run called World Benevolence Group on Telegram, and we are a bunch of humanitarians waiting for the reset so that we can go ahead and do projects. I would like to be able to offer Lauren a donation in whatever amount that she needs in order to expand what she wants to do. In other words, think of yourself like a project and what it is that you need. And because we have associate members, those are people who don't have currencies or bonds, so they're not going to be exchanging, right? So we fully fund them because we're a bunch of benefactors, humanitarian benefactors. And I would like to get in touch with you by email or through Facebook. I'll send you my email, and we can set that up for you so that you can expand your facility that you have for these dogs that you take in. And I came in partway through, so I missed the first half, but I'll go back and I'll listen to the tape when it's posted. Okay. So,
Wow.
yeah. So dream big and dream bigger is my motto for my group. So do not worry about the dollar sign. Everything is taken care of already. Okay.
Wow. I mean, thank you so much. I mean,
You're
you have
quite
no
welcome.
idea how much that, just
You're welcome.
that brings me so much joy.
Where do you live? What state are you?
I'm in East Texas.
Perfect. No problem. That's just for me. I just wanted to know where you hang out. So I think what you do is beautiful. And I think that the world should know about people like yourself. And you have a lot to offer that is so desperately needed. Because my dog is the sweetest little thing. And he was born with one eye. And, he already had a disability. And the food has just been, for me, my greatest angst in this world to try and fix him. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart and his.
Thank you so much. It just means the world to me. I mean, it's like, being like everything I do is volunteer work, even like I do consultations to help people, but like I also do a lot of consultations via donation. So, every day is a struggle just monetarily. So, I just really, really appreciate it. Like any kind of like gratitude like that. It's just warms my heart. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. And that also goes for anybody in this group that's listening right now that has some kind of a dream or a vision that they want to do, just to contact me, Luna at worldbenevolencegroup.ca. Okay? So, thank you again.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, sister. And I will make sure to get you guys in contact. But yeah, could you say that email just one more time, if you don't mind?
Not at all. It's Luna at World Benevolence Group, all one word, .ca. All lowercase.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate the kindness. And yes, Lauren is very deserving of getting this assistance and this support. So yeah, it's a good
And
good
anybody
thing
else, Justin, that you think could benefit from what I do, please send them to me. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, sister. It means a lot.
Have a beautiful rest of the day.
Yeah,
we're all
thanks, you.
here. We are all one. Remember, so we're
Yes.
all here to help each other. And I love people like Lauren because it's just a beautiful thing who you are, and the world needs to know what you know. Thank you.
Absolutely. What a beautiful message. And it is getting back to nature, because this is the natural state of how this creation is made. It is built on unconditional love, is built in this support. We've deviated away from that into this unnatural setting where we're all separate, where we've lost our connection. So coming back to that connected space and moving back into that space of support is, it's essential in what we're doing. So thanks again. And yeah, I think that would be a wonderful note to close on. So Lauren, just wanted to pass it back to you to see if you had any closing comments you wanted to share with anybody before we wrap up today.
Yeah, just, like if you have any questions, if you sometimes it takes a little while for stuff to sink in. So, if you have any questions, please come join us over in the Facebook group. We're always happy to help and answer any questions we can and get you on the right track and just, get the information into your hands. So, just reach out, and, if you feel so inclined, let people know, invite your friends, and we're just trying to change the world one dog at a time, one person at a time. So, it takes all of us. It takes effort from all of us to make these changes and to, overcome the monetary, the medical industry has this like monetary stranglehold over people, and as much as we don't, us volunteer type people, as volunteer minded people, we don't necessarily have that money mindset, and so we're at that disadvantage versus the for-profit businesses, and so we do rely on just other people's goodness of heart, and just your willingness to talk about things and tell people and help us expand in that way.
Yeah. So let's help each other out. And thanks again, Lauren, for being here with us today. And we'll make sure to get all the links in the post when I post it. I'll probably post this on YouTube and my website. And then, of course, Lauren, you're welcome to post it wherever you like as well. And this has been a wonderful discussion, and happy to continue this. So you're welcome back anytime, Lauren, if you have more to share with us, and we'll make sure to keep in touch in all the ways. So thank you again, sister. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, y'all have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are. And let's get back to nature. Let's get back to what's good. So take care, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.